Good afternoon. I will call to order the January 22nd meeting of the Minneapolis City Planning Commission. My name is Matt Brown. I serve as president of the commission. We're joined by a new commissioner today. Jeremy Schrader is our new city council representative. Also present today are Commissioners Kronzer, Slack, Sweezy, and Rockwell. At this time, I'll ask that you silence any mobile devices and we can get started with our meeting. First item of business is to approve the actions from the January 8th meeting. May I have a motion to approve those actions? We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. And that motion carries. Next, we will approve the agenda. You can find hard copies of the agenda in the hallway. We'll determine which items will be discussed, which will be on consent, and which will be continued to another meeting. So, starting at the top, item 1 is at 2526 Emerson Avenue South. That is an alley vacation in the vicinity of Jefferson Elementary School. Is there anyone wishing to speak in opposition to or modify the staff recommendation on item 1? I see no one. We'll put item 1 on consent. Item 2 is at 4204 Drew Avenue South. That is a variance and a minor subdivision. Is there anyone wishing to speak in opposition to or modify the staff recommendation on item 2? Seeing no one, we'll put item 2 on consent. Item 3 is at 408 4th Street Southeast, several applications for a new multifamily building. Is anyone wishing to speak in opposition to or modify the staff recommendation on item 3? Seeing no one, we'll put item 3 on consent. Item 4 is the shopping center renovation at 2425 West Broadway. We'll discuss item 4 if anyone is here for that. Item 5 is Rex 26 at 2601 through 2621 Lyndale Avenue South, several applications for a new mixed-use building there. We'll discuss item 5, and just so I have an idea, is there anyone wishing to speak on item 5? There isn't anyone, although we'll discuss that anyway. Item 6 is an Islamic Center at 2824 13th Avenue South. That is several applications for a building addition there. Is anyone wishing to speak in opposition to or modify the staff recommendation on item 6? Seeing no one, we'll put item 6 on consent. Item 7 is the cottages on Lake Harriet at 4324 West Lake Harriet Parkway. Several applications for a new residential building there. We'll discuss item 7, and also so I have an idea, is there anyone here to speak on item 7 on West Lake Harriet Parkway? There's no one, although we will discuss that item. Item 8 is the Twin Cities International School addition at 277 12th Avenue North, an expansion of non-conforming use, variance, and site plan review for a school addition. Is there anyone wishing to speak in opposition to or modify the staff recommendation on item 8? Seeing no one, we'll put item 8 on consent. And finally, item 9 is Sons of Norway. That's at 1455 West Lake Street, 3016 Holmes Avenue South, 3001 Humboldt Avenue South, 3015 Humboldt Avenue South, 3017 Humboldt Avenue South, and 3021 Humboldt Avenue South. Several applications for a new mixed-use building there. We'll discuss item 9, and are some of you here for item 9? Yes, I figured we'd have some people for that. So we'll discuss that a little later in the meeting. Then finally, item 10 is a zoning code text amendment related to billboards. That item will be continued to the February 5th meeting. If anyone is here for that item, it's my understanding that because that amendment was introduced last year, it needed to be reintroduced by the new council, and it's the intent of the author not to reintroduce that. So we'll take formal action on February 5th, but it's likely that that proposal will not go forward. All right, so our agenda as amended is as follows. Items 1, 2, 3, 6, and 8 will be on consent. We will discuss items 4, 5, 7, and 9, and item 10 will be continued. May I have a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
So moved.
We have a motion. Is there a second? We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
And that motion carries. Next, we have our committee of the whole consent agenda. And Vice President Slack, do you have an update on that?
Thank you, President Brown. At the January 11, 2018 Committee of the Whole, we heard one item, the 2018 CPC calendar, and the recommended motion that we approve the calendar for 2018.
All right, I will take that as a motion to approve the 2018 calendar. Is there a second? And I'll just note that there is one correction on that calendar. The meeting, committee of the whole meeting shown on August 29th will actually be on August 30th. So with that correction, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? And that motion carries. Next, may I have a motion to continue item 10 to the February 5th meeting? We have a motion and a second. All in favor? That motion carries. Next, we'll move on to the public hearing portion of our meeting. And at this time, I'll open the public hearing for the items on the consent agenda. That is items 1, 2, 3, 6, and 8. One last opportunity. Is there anyone who would like to speak on items 1, 2, 3, 6, or 8? Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing. And commissioners may have a motion to approve the consent agenda. We have a motion and a second. All in favor? That motion carries. Next, we'll move on to our 4 items for discussion. We will start with item 4, 2425 West Broadway. Staff is Ms. Rouse.
Good evening, members of the commission. This is a request for a zone change to go from the C1 district to the C2 district and a conditional use permit to allow a shopping center at 2425 West Broadway. An aerial image showing the existing building. It was constructed in 1860 as a drive-through laundry or dry cleaners. Since then, it's been used as a shopping center with 2 tenant spaces, the most recent being the amazing Oriental Market. The tenant or the current owner wants to split it into 3 tenant spaces, which is the need for the conditional use permit. You can see the existing parking lot here. So the site is currently zoned C1, as is much of the area. The CVS pharmacy located just to the north is the only C2 zoning. And back in 2009, as part of the West Broadway Alive rezonings, this area remained C1 because the CVS had just been constructed. They left that as C2 zoning, but the intent was really to focus development at Penn and Plymouth, which you can see some down zonings to comply with that. And so the existing site plan here, the parking lot will remain in the same configuration as it is today. There'll be some new striping for the handicap stall and some additional landscaping along 26th Avenue North and West Broadway. And staff is recommending to deny the petition to rezone it from C1 to C2 based on that West Broadway study and the rezonings that took place at that time, but to approve the conditional use permit to allow the shopping center with the 5 conditions of approval that you can find on page 6 of your staff report. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, commissioners, are there any questions of staff? If there are none, I'll open the public hearing on this item. I'd like to ask the applicant to speak first, if there's anyone here to speak on behalf of the applicant. Item 4, maybe the applicant isn't here. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on item 4? Since there is no one, I will close the public hearing. And commissioners, perhaps we can start with the rezoning. Item A. Would anyone like to start off the discussion with a motion, or are there any further questions or comments? Commissioner Slack. Commissioner Rockwell?
Sure. I'd move to adopt staff recommendation to deny the rezoning and approve the conditional use permit for a shopping center.
All right, we have a motion and a second to follow staff recommendation and deny the rezoning and approve the conditional use permit. Is there any further discussion? Commissioner Rockwell.
I'll just say briefly, you know, we've had a couple of these since the tobacco shop ordinance, and I think it's the commission's job to really look at the zoning as a rezoning and appropriate in the context. As with all, and I know we've got rezoning later this evening, which we'll talk about that same issue. And so I think that's where the inconsistency in at least my perspectives on on these come from. It's not that that there should be a tobacco shop some places and not in other places, and so on and so forth. But that it's really about that rezoning, and I think it's just important for us to relay that message because I'm sure we'll see more of these as well.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner Rockwell. Is there anyone else who has anything to add? I think Commissioner Rockwell outlined the reasons for denial well, and that's well outlined in the staff report as well. So if there's no further discussion, we have a motion and a second. Clerk, please call the roll.
Franzer?
Aye.
Rockwell?
Aye.
Slack?
Aye.
Sweezy?
Aye.
4-0.
Schrader also should vote.
Schrader?
Aye.
5-0.
And that motion carries. That concludes our discussion on item 4. And our next item for discussion is item 5, Rex 26. Staff is Mr. Hanover.
All right, good afternoon, Commission. So the amended plans for 2601 to 2621 Lyndale Avenue South. In July of 2017, this body approved the project seen in the top rendering, 86 units, 5-story building, and a 21,000 square foot grocery store. Construction is underway with the footings and foundation permit approved. The applicant is requesting some changes to their approved plans that you can see in the lower rendering. That would add approximately 11,000 square feet to that 5th floor and a total of 11 units, but they'd be keeping that height at 62 feet. That height would not be changing from what they were previously approved for. Just a couple more images. I know in the packet there's 8 comparisons of approved and now proposed, but just highlighting where that additional square footage or bulk would be located. Here on 2 portions along Lyndale, you can see that portion that's closer to the alley that would be added when comparing the images. And another vantage point is from the Garfield Gables building or from the east. So the same applications that you see in front of you that you'll be voting on were the ones that you voted on before. But since there's that additional square footage added, those applications needed to be, and the placement of that square footage, those are the reasons why they needed to reapply for those variances and the conditional use permit for the height. Just highlight some of those things that haven't changed since the previous approvals. Like I said, the building height staying at 62 feet. The footprint is staying the same. Exterior materials, which was a condition of approval that was modified by this commission. They're not showing any magic pack equipment. They're doing a different heating system, which does impact the design of the building. And just the overall design we feel is similar, and vehicle access and circulation. The applicant, and they can talk to this more, openly admits that the reason that they're coming back for this 3rd time is there's some financial reasons and unforeseen circumstances that they can better describe. But when CPED did analyze the applications, we did not look at the financial considerations. It was looking at the findings for the conditional use permit and the variances. And we saw that the project was still in compliance with the small area plan, wanting greater density and intensity in people and businesses between 26th and 28th Street. Comp plan guidance for a commercial corridor with the same goals. And that the design still relates to the area with keeping that 1st floor at 20 feet. The previous version was taller than that, and the U-shaped design. There are a number of letters in your addendum packet from the public that do express concerns about the project. There's also a letter from the Neighborhood Association that does recommend support of the project with conditions of approval. And one of those I do want to draw your attention to, that was the affordable housing element or request, either wanting 20 units or 20%. And that does come into play with density bonuses, but in consultation with our attorney, this is a direct quote, outside the applicant availing themselves of the density bonus or voluntarily providing affordable units, the city does not have the legal authority to require or mandate, as proposed, through an imposed condition. So we strongly encourage not looking at adding a condition that talks about and speaks about affordable housing. But with that said, the applicant in their application does talk about their intent and their attempts to look at having some affordable housing component. I think that summarizes the staff report and staff's recommendation of approval for the project and the applications.
Okay, are there any questions of staff? Commissioner Kronzer.
Yeah, Aaron, does the previous conditions to the project continue, even though some of them are not listed on today's actions?
Yeah, some of the intent was to have those previous conditions continue, but if there's one or two that aren't in there, we could be explicit in adding them back to the conditions.
The one about the power to the bus shelter did not make it back.
That was our
Is it in there?
intent
Okay.
to have that.
All right.
I'll look at that.
Aaron, I think we concluded it is in fact there. It is there.
Great. Number 4.
Are there any further questions of staff?
No.
If there are none, I'll open the public hearing on this item, and I'd like to ask the applicant to speak first. And perhaps you could talk a little bit about the reason for the changes.
And I just one thing, I do know that someone from the public is trying to get down here, and hopefully they will be here.
All right. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Don Gerberding with Master Properties, and we're at 201 West Broadway in Minneapolis. Well, as with a little preamble here, as with many things in life, urban development notwithstanding, the goal is to ask enough questions, seek enough help, and continue undauntedly with a process that really never loses sight of making a better project at each step along the way. As I have repeatedly stating, returning multiple times to Kyle and the neighborhoods and seeking input from staff always makes a better project with better suggestions. So this project's no different. Actually, it could be said if this project comes around again, we've probably used up all the ideas. I've also heard it said that there's a certain amount of deal fatigue with this project and people are tired of me requesting changes. Honestly, I'm tired of me too. But moving forward, really this project, and I've been doing this a long time, this project is a poster child for the complexities that come with development of good, quality, urban, mixed-use projects that have superior design and functionality. This is a project that brings new housing, needed grocery options, and long-term benefit to the neighborhood. So by way of background, the building is currently under construction based on the plans that were approved in June of 2017. The issue at hand is the design team has had a constant and ongoing challenge to manage the necessary architectural changes driven by two things, but most exclusively by the need to accommodate the requirements of the grocery tenant. Now, the site has its challenges, as we all well know, because the back of the site on the alley is 5 feet higher than the street or the intersection. But the reason we're here today with these structural changes and the tenant requirements, they were unknown at the previous project approvals last June. Initially, the project was designed to industry standards for any conventional retail user. However, the grocery tenant has required major design modifications in excess of industry standards to meet their operational needs. Implementing these structural changes made the project not feasible under the previous approvals. We are not asking for any consideration or change to the previous building design regarding the building footprint, the building height, the exterior building materials. The project will have the same traffic circulation and the same building elevations, which includes fourth and fifth floor setbacks at both Lyndale and 26th intersection. The only requested change from the previous 86-unit development is a request for an increase in FAR by adding 11 additional units to the previous design. These units will be considered a horizontal expansion and will be limited only to the fifth floor. So if we look at the images in your packet, you'll see that the previous approval had a ribbon down the top of the fifth floor. We have now proposed to expand that to add 11 units, still stepping it back from the street and from both streets and the intersection. Aaron alluded a little bit to some opportunity for affordable housing. Returning to what I said earlier about the process of development and continually asking questions through our lender, the project has perhaps found an alternative form of financing which may also contribute to solving some of the current project issues or challenges. A financing option we're very interested in pursuing is the 2018 New Market Tax Credit Program. Under this program, the project will be able to set aside 20% of the units as affordable housing at 80% of the AMI. Rex 26 is in the process of applying to the appropriate CDE entities in the marketplace for this New Market Tax Credit Program. Please understand, the allocation of the tax credits and its CDC recipients has yet to occur. The federal government will not release the 2018 allocations until late January, which is at the end of this month. We will only know at that time which CDCs will get allocation. However, despite the tentative nature of these unknown allocations, we've learned from good sources that the project will rank quite high as a qualifying candidate for the program based on the site location and providing multiple neighborhood grocery and an affordable income qualifier as it relates to the housing component. Again, please understand that there's no guarantee that Rex will be successful in getting the tax credits until they're officially allocated. Therefore, it's imperative that the city approvals this evening not be conditioned upon Rex having the new market tax credits in hand. However, as a matter of record, if Rex is successful in securing the new market tax credit financing, it's good for the project, and it's good because the availability to contribute 20% for affordable housing, which is 20 units, and it's 20% of the project units. So that's the background. That's why we're here today. That's the request. I know the packet contains the application particulars. So at this point, I'll leave it for any questions which the commissioners may have of me.
Right. Commissioners, are there any questions for the applicant? Commissioner Slack.
Yeah, can you just describe in a little bit more detail how the square footage change in the retail? So you're going from, what did we approve? 2,100 square feet to 21,800, so 800 additional square feet. How that fundamental change, which I'm guessing is mostly on the ground floor, how that requires the need for the increased bulk and increased density on the upper units. And I'm only asking the question because you have been coming to the commission for a long time regarding this project, and literally this project, at least when you just look at the metrics of it, it goes all the way back to when we first started, and we had a lot of issues with the building when it first started. Mm-hmm. And you worked with us to get the building to the point where we approved it, and now I feel like we're just taking a step back 2 years to where we were, which is challenging for me because I know we spent a lot of time looking at this building, its contextual relationship, how it met the neighborhood, how it met the street, and all the setbacks. And literally, this looks like the first concept that we reviewed 2 years ago.
Commissioner Slack, the commercial component of this project has not changed. It's still the same square footage. It's still the same footprint. The square footage which has been added to the project is only on the 5th floor and only represents units, the additional 11 housing units.
Are there any further questions of the applicant? Commissioner Kronzer.
I think what Commissioner Slack was getting at is in the staff report references changes requested by the commercial tenant that required additional changes to the project. Just wondering if you can walk us through what those were.
Sure. The structural changes which were required by the retail tenant is a sheet pile deep foundation system to be installed along the south property line. There were major changes in the precast structural concrete beams, the columns, the precast plank components. And that was driven by, as I referred to earlier, the conventional design of the structure for floor loading was essentially doubled by this tenant for operational reasons. And that requirement for additional live and dead loads is what drove the redesign for thicker beams, thicker plank, longer spans, and that's what drove our cost.
Commissioner Schrader.
I guess I'm sorry, I'm a little new to this, so just
Welcome.
dumb question. Well, thanks. Why were those not known? I mean, if this is your tenant based on this plan, why is this new? And my second part to that would be, why is the tenant looking at picking up some part of that? I mean, you've already started the project. For me, that seems a little odd.
As we continue to work with the tenant after our last approvals, that's when the project engineers and architects became more specifically involved with the tenants, engineers and architects. It was a process, it was an iterative process as we worked through this, and those became known only after our last approvals. With regard to, is the tenant going to help pick up some of this cost? The answer is no. The tenant was unwilling to participate, and they just said, if you would like the lease that is currently under consideration, they will not participate.
All right. Are there any further questions of the applicant? Hearing none, is there anyone else here who would like to speak on item 5? If there is no one, I will close the public hearing. And commissioners, we have several applications before us, a total of 6, starting with the conditional use permit, several variances. Commissioner Schrader.
Just a quick question. Did I hear correctly that a member of the public was trying to come?
Yeah, I was trying to check in with them right now and see. And it's Danny Schwartzman, who's the owner of Common Roots, and you have the letter in your packet. But he's been very involved with this and along the way, so we wanted to give him the opportunity, but he was stuck on a bus to get downtown. But oh no.
All right. Commissioner Kronzer.
I have a question for staff. Aaron, do you have the sketches I sent you last week? So I sent, just seeing what the proposal was and how it related back to the version that was approved. I thought a little bit of shifting around of brick to metal shingle might help minimize that 5th floor. The original, as you see on the top here, the original 5th floor was all metal panel or metal shingle. And the applicant in front of us right now has brick on that 5th floor, which is a lighter color. So I suggested that that lighter colored brick be moved to the north elevation where you can see there, and metal shingle, which is darker, be continued on that 5th floor. I just thought this was more consistent with what we approved last time, and kind of helps minimize that additional FAR.
Commissioners, the applicant did update the drawings, and I'll pass them around both so you can see the marked up version here and what it looked like unmarked.
All right. Any further comments? Can look at this.
I hope that shows.
We're having trouble with the overhead at the moment.
Or is this covered?
It's not showing up.
Right. Sorry about that. Oh yeah. Two things, if I could. One, the applicant is agreeable and amenable to those proposed changes by Commissioner Kronzer. And the other thing is that I know that someone from the public was able to make it here if it's not too
Yep,
late.
we can allow him to speak. All right. Well, we're passing around some hard copies of those potential changes. I understand that our expected speaker has arrived, so I think I actually closed the public hearing, so I'll reopen the public hearing and give him an opportunity to speak. So if you'd like to come to the microphone and state your name and address for the record, that would be great.
Hello, my name is Danny Schwartzman. I own Common Roots Cafe at 26th and Lyndale. And I'm sorry, I literally just walked here, so the bus got stuck. So, how much time do I have?
We're not timing you, but
Minutes?
2 minutes or so.
Okay, and I'm sorry I missed Aaron's presentation. I assume he went through the basics, and I sent a letter. Hopefully, you all have had a chance to review it. I have a number of concerns about this project. I was here at the previous application and voiced those concerns. And I have concerns about the history of the project and the tearing down of the hardware store and all these things, which I reviewed in my comments. And I'll skip that part of and just focus on what I think is the most pertinent now. The developer in this project didn't really engage in a community process. There was no conversation with neighbor association beyond basics at an early stage of the project. There was no in-reach to the neighboring business owners or residents. I didn't hear from this developer until I asked for a meeting after the project had been approved. There's very, very, very basic things just didn't happen. And I say that because I think when a developer asks for a variance, it's a significant variance from our planning code and from what's established, which this is, that I think that we should expect a very basic level of community engagement, and there should be a reason that we're granting the variance that's in the community of interest. I think it should be a significant reason. And in this case, we just don't see that. Beyond that, I think that the basics of this, the logic of this variance, we already received the variance. So construction started 3 months ago with never-ending pounding of the walls for the 3 stories of underground parking, which I assume you all know. And the developer is now saying that there are new facts that were not plannable before, that have required economically and otherwise forced this. And that's something about a requirement that Aldi's has about some unknown thing with the first floor. So when we first heard this project years ago, probably about 3 years ago, Aldi's was the tenant. So the idea that this is a new and unplannable, unforeseeable thing is hard for me to believe. I also know that like when this was first floated, this was a 6-story project that had a floor area ratio. There's approximately, it's 3.3. And then we went down to 2.8 after community feedback. Then we went up to 3.1 with the last draft that was approved. Now we're up to 3.4, which is right where we started. on this economic necessity, this unavoidable thing that's not unique to this site. I'm sorry, I literally just walked in, but the language is, it's not unique to this site, was not created by the applicant or someone related to the applicant, and is not for purely economic means. This is a requirement that they've said is because the tenant they selected and had previous relationship with has asked them to do something. So if that's not an economic necessity that is defined by their control, I don't know what is. They're the ones that are picking the tenant. Unless they've done something that doesn't make any sense, they negotiated the lease with the tenant. It's in their control. So they're saying in their point that that's why they need this variance, which is purely economic reasons, purely under their control. They didn't engage in a neighborhood process. They didn't have a conversation with us about what we'd like to see. They didn't talk with the neighborhood association. They sent a basic letter. And I would really like to see, if this variance goes through, that it only goes through with real support for things that are good for the neighborhood. And those things are things like affordable housing, which I think this developer could do. They introduced it in the last letter that they sent to the neighborhood association. And in conversations I had with them, they said the same thing. I don't think it's real. I don't think that they're really going to get approval, and what they're talking about is at a very low level, but they introduced the idea of affordable housing. I think that we should take them up on that idea. And I think we should make it real and meaningful in a level that's impactful to the community. I don't know what that will take because the developer hasn't engaged in a conversation about it. And at this point, all they've said is an idea, but they won't know before this meeting. So I think if that factors in your decision making, we should delay this decision until they have that plan in place. They've had years to work on this plan. They should be able to tell us the truth about what this project's going to look like before they get approval. They've already started construction. This is pretty unreasonable in my opinion. I'd also like to see environmental features. The developer floated those early on. I cited those in my letter. Clearly they're doable. They aren't included in the project. I'm concerned about the scale of a 5-story wall that is a significant addition. They say there's no major changes in the project. They added 11 units and 10,000 square feet on the 5th floor. And they sold the 5th floor, which wasn't going to be there in an earlier draft, as being stepped back and not really visible from the street. And that's obviously no longer the case. So for me, I think that I ask you all, and would greatly appreciate your taking the community concerns to heart and pointing out when a developer does something as egregious as apply for variances for purely economic reasons 3 months after they have started construction, that we say no short of real meaningful community engagement and real meaningful community compromises. And I'd be happy to engage further in this conversation on any date if you'd like. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And is there anyone else, one more time, is there anyone else who would like to speak on item 5? Seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing. And commissioners, are there any further questions? Would someone like to start?
Yeah, I have another question for Aaron.
Commissioner Kron.
Do we have shadow studies in our packet? Could you run those to the overhead?
So this would be the most recent shadow study.
Is there anything noticeable change from the current proposal? I wasn't able to find much.
In comparing the two, I don't see that much noticeable in difference between both the projects. I mentioned the height staying the same, and another thing to point out is, as of right, the project would be allowed 4 stories or 56 feet in height, and this project is at 62 feet, so just a few feet over what they'd be allowed for in terms of linear feet above sea level. They are asking for that 5th floor. That is definitely beyond what is allowed by right and allowed through the conditional use permit.
Any further questions? Total of 6 applications before us. Starting with the conditional use permit. Commissioner Kronzer.
I will make a motion to start the conversation. I move staff recommendation to approve the conditional use permit to increase the maximum height in the C2 to 5 stories or 62 feet with the one condition.
We have a motion to approve item A, the conditional use permit. Is there a second? We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Commissioner Kronzer.
Yeah, we've spent a lot of time on this project. And I think this is not the same proposal we saw a year and a half ago or so. It's gone through a significant redesign. The materials are of a higher quality than we first saw. The massing has changed pretty dramatically. There's a high level of public streetscaping that's included in this plan that we've already approved. So I can maybe hold my nose and vote again for these changes on this project.
Commissioner Sweezy.
Thank you. I voted against this project in the beginning, and I'm going to vote against it tonight. The reasons I voted against it back a year and a half ago were that I thought that the size of the apartment building was too big compared to the scale of other things around it. I remember very much the discussion from the neighborhood groups at that time, complaining, well, not complaining, but stating that they didn't get sufficient notice then. It doesn't appear that that's changed. I was also concerned about whether a grocery store of this size was the right kind of tenant for that spot and at that location, and just the way it fit into the neighborhood in general. And I think these repeated requests to change the project are evidence that my concerns were right to a certain extent. So I'll be voting against it.
All right. Any further discussion? Commissioner Rockwell.
Yeah, I think the findings of the CUP, which we're discussing right now, are, I will vote yes on this, but I do think that the FAR increase I would have voted yes initially, but I believe the public testimony is correct, that this is really based on economic considerations alone. And so while I think that a building of this height here can work and supported it before, I am still thinking about the FAR ratio difference, because that is a different matter, and I mean, maybe we'll discuss that in the next round, but I think this parses out into these different applications we have before us in a complicated way.
Okay, is there any further discussion on the motion to approve the conditional use permit? Commissioner Magrino.
So we have a motion on the table right now, but I wonder if the potential for having an affordable housing component of this is a real proposal that might actually happen, if it might make sense to potentially continue this one cycle, if that is something that you're supposed to know by the end of the month. I think adding the affordable units to this would make it a little bit more compelling of a project, and I think it would also get the variance, the math would change on the variance a little bit. I usually don't like continuing things, but I mean, this seems like maybe a situation where that would be appropriate.
Maybe if the applicant would like to consider that, and you can certainly respond if that seems acceptable to you. In the meantime, Commissioner Slack.
I think to follow up on Commissioner Rockwell, I agree with the CUP. We've talked about this for a year now, and I think the CUP is appropriate, but I do struggle with the FAR only because we spent a lot of time thinking about, again, how this building relates to the street frontage, how it relates to its adjacencies. And I feel like even though we have a better building, higher quality materials, we've gone 360 degrees right back to where we were from a massing standpoint. And so I will vote in favor of the CUP, but we'll talk about the other variances later.
All right. Well, since we have a motion and a second, and it appears no further discussion on item A, the conditional use permit, Clerk, please call the roll.
Franzer,
Aye.
Magrino,
Aye.
Rockwell,
Aye.
Schrader,
Aye.
Slack,
Aye.
Sweezy,
No.
5-1.
That motion carries. Next, we have item B, the variance for floor area ratio. Would someone like to make a motion on that? Commissioner Kronzer.
Yeah, I move approval of staff recommendation for the increase to the maximum floor area ratio. And I'd like to add at least one condition, that the applicant shall modify the exterior materials to reflect option 1 on the rendering shown at the public hearing tonight.
All right, we have a motion to approve item B, the variance to increase the maximum allowable floor area ratio with a condition that the applicant modify the exterior materials to reflect option 1 that was shown at tonight's meeting. Is there a second? We have a motion and a second. Further discussion. Commissioner Rockwell.
Yeah, just to follow up on my last thoughts, I think I'm going to vote no on this, and I do think that that there's, we are maybe in a disagreement on or working through what the commission's authority is on conditioning affordable housing, for one. But I do think that regardless of that authority, there is a question of what the practical difficulties are beyond economic considerations, and without something giving back to the community in some way specifically, whether that's affordable housing or there are other suggestions in this in public letters, in public testimony. There are things that are not listed here, which I'm sure would also sway me, because trying to achieve those things for the public more broadly is something that supports the comprehensive plan and supports the city's goals, and trying to achieve those and not being able to achieve those, I think we would see as a practical difficulty, or I would. So I just wanted to loop back on that and provide some detail.
All right. Any further discussion? Commissioner Magrino.
So I'll be supporting the motion. I mean, I think I'm generally unhappy that we've seen this like 5 or 6 times, but this is probably something that I would have supported if this were the first time that we saw it. And so I'm trying not to hold that against the applicant. I mean, I think adding a grocery store right here at 26 in Lyndale is something that would be a pretty significant amenity to kind of the greater Whittier, Lowry Hill East area. It would certainly help, cut down on the number of car trips that are going to be happening in kind of that greater area, as people are able to walk up to a grocery store that's right there. Don't have to maybe drive to the Cub in Uptown or drive somewhere else. It also adds a lower cost grocery option, not that we are necessarily considering that it's an Aldi specifically. So I'll be supporting the motion, though. Again, this obviously isn't the best way to do a project.
Okay, any further discussion on the motion to approve the variance for FAR with one condition added? If there is no further discussion, we have a motion and a second. Clerk, please call a roll.
Franzer,
Aye.
Magrino,
Aye.
Rockwell,
No.
Schrader,
No.
Slack,
No.
Sweezy.
No.
So that's 2 yeses, 4 noes.
Right, and that motion fails. Would someone like to make an alternate motion? And if that motion is to deny, we should be sure to include some findings for the reason for that denial. You can find the findings that need to be made for a variance in the staff report. Would someone like to make that motion? Commissioner Rockwell.
I'm sorry, for the, you're saying to clarify the findings on that, the motion that was just voted on?
That motion failed, so I'm assuming someone may want to make a motion to deny the variance. So
Oh, yes,
if we
sorry.
do make that motion, we should just be
I will.
clear that
Yep.
that particular variance did not meet those findings. And
Yeah, I will move to deny the application for a floor area variance based on the finding that the circumstances were created solely based on economic considerations, in that the necessity for the increased bulk was driven by negotiations with a tenant, and I think details that could have and should have been understood before coming in.
all right. So we have a motion to deny the FAR variance, citing that the rationale behind the variance is solely for economic reasons and that practical difficulties don't exist. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If there is no further discussion, we have a motion and a second. Clerk, please call the roll.
Kranzer,
No.
Magrino,
No.
Rockwell,
Aye.
Schrader,
Aye.
Slack,
Aye.
Sweezy.
Aye.
That's 4-2.
And that motion carries. Next, we have item C, which has been returned, so we don't need to vote on that. Items D, E, and F, perhaps we could take all those together. Commissioner Rockwell?
I would. Well, I think we need to perhaps split D and E and then F. So I'd vote to adopt staff recommendations for items D and E.
We have a motion to approve items D and E, which is staff recommendation. Is there a second? Motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Kranzer,
Aye.
Magrino,
Aye.
Rockwell,
Aye.
Schrader,
Aye.
Slack,
Aye.
Sweezy.
No.
That's 5-1.
And that motion carries. Finally, item F, Commissioner Rockwell.
Item F, I will move to deny item F based on the building bulk and height issues identified earlier.
All right, we have a motion to deny item F, the site plan review, and the reason for that is we voted to deny the FAR variance in the site plan.
Correct.
Is tied into that. Is there a second? Okay. Motion and a second. Commissioner Kranzer.
I guess I have a question for staff. If we have this project already has an approved site plan, how would denying this site plan review impact that?
Mr. Hanauer.
Commissioner Kranzer, they have their approvals for back from July 2017 that they can act upon. So the denial of this site plan review request or amendment will not impact their previous approvals.
Is it any different?
It's true that with the site, there's maybe minimal changes in and of itself, but within that site plan review application, as you know, it's analyzing the building bulk, height, and
And this
scale.
goes back to the technical issue we learned about. Okay, got it. Thank you.
All right. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we have a motion and a second to deny the site plan review. Clerk, please call the roll.
Kranzer,
Aye.
Magrino,
No.
you say no?
Yeah.
Rockwell,
Aye.
Schrader,
Aye.
Slack,
Aye.
Sweezy.
Aye.
It's 5-1.
And that motion carries. That concludes our discussion on item 5. Our next item for discussion is item 7, 4324 West Lake Harriet Parkway. Staff is Ms. Wallace. Ms. Wallace, we can probably have a pretty quick presentation since I don't believe we have anyone here to speak on this item. Is there anyone here for item 7 who's showed up? You're here for item 7. We're just getting to that, so you'll have an opportunity to speak.
The item before you is the proposed cluster development of 4 units at 4324 West Lake Harriet Parkway. This site is located on along the western shoreline of Lake Harriet, separated from the lake by West Lake Harriet Parkway. It's located 1 long block from the main Linden Hills commercial node. The nearby properties consist of a range of residential densities. You can see from the zoning map that the property is surrounded to the west by an R4 zoning district. Immediately to the south are primarily single-family homes, but there is a non-conforming condo building in that area. And then further south, again, is another R4 district. The site is 6,260 square feet, and I will draw your attention to the fact that the cover page on the staff report had an error from previously submitted square footage. So the square footage was correct in the other parts of the staff report, but just that cover sheet had smaller square footage. So the site is currently occupied by a non-conforming duplex, and the existing zoning is R1 with the shoreland overlay. So here's the site. It's wider at the front of the lot, and it narrows and curves to the rear of the lot. The applicant has proposed to establish a cluster development of 4 units on the site. That would include retaining the existing duplex at the front of the site and constructing a new building, which would consist of 6 garage stalls on the first floor and a second floor with 2 dwelling units for a total of 4 dwelling units. The applications required for this application are rezoning from the R1 single family district to R4 multiple family district, conditional use permit to allow a cluster development, and a number of variances relating to the yards, including a variance to both of the interior side yards at the north and south, and to the rear yard at the west, and then 2 variances to allow a patio that exceeds 50 feet to encroach into the north and south interior side yards, and site plan review. Here's a rendering of the front and back and side of the structure and the site plan. So you can see that the shape of the site is an interesting one, and so the way that the new proposed building would be situated is pretty close to the north and south side yards, and because of the angle of the rear yard, it is quite close along the north side of the rear yard as well. I will draw your attention to the fact that there are public alleys to the north and south of the site. So immediately on either side of the interior side yards is a public alley. And so staff has confirmed with building code plan review that there wouldn't be any life safety concerns about building this close to the property lines due to public right of way that's immediately adjacent. Here's a floor plan of the garage and the proposed 2 apartment buildings on the second floor. So the applicant has proposed to rezone the site. It's identified as urban neighborhood on the future land use map. And while urban neighborhood isn't primarily intended to accommodate significant new population growth, adding some additional density in this area does meet city goals of supporting density near natural amenities and commercial areas. And it would also promote a range of residential housing types in the area. And so I just wanted to point out that staff had considered 2 different pathways. We consider both R4 and R3 zoning for this project. However, R3 zoning would have required 3 additional variances to lot area, lot coverage, and impervious surfaces. So staff determined that R3 was not a good fit for this project to allow it in its current form. And so there have been some concerns. You have a packet of additional information. Some letters submitted by neighbors concerned about the height limit in the base zoning of R4. However, the limit for height of a cluster development in R4 is 2.5 stories or 35 feet, which is also the limit that the shoreland overlay imposes. So this is the future land use map. So in your staff report, it had been identified that this project, this site was part of the Linden Hills Small Area Plan. And while it is in the area of influence, I just wanted to draw your attention to the fact that the goals and guidelines for the small area plan are not meant to apply to the area of influence. So this is a future land use map, and the Linden Hill Small Area Plan and rezoning study did not change the zoning or the guidance for this parcel. So it is identified as low density residential. This cluster development would be consistent with a residential density of 28 dwelling units per acre, which is slightly higher than the up to 20 units identified as low density residential. However, it does help meet those other comprehensive plan goals. The applicant has applied for a conditional use permit to allow the cluster development, and staff has found that there are no expected detrimental impacts on the neighborhood from the proposed cluster development. And then the yard variances, as I previously mentioned, the proposed yards are pretty narrow. The north property line would be reduced to 1 foot, the south property line reduced to 3 inches, and the rear yard setback along the west property line would be reduced to 6.8 inches. And due to the unique structure of the lot and the narrow buildable width, staff did find practical difficulty, and that the separation of uses would be achieved by those adjacent residential alleys. And the proposed patio in between the two structures would provide the common space that's required for a cluster development, and staff found that could potentially lead to more active uses in between those public alleys and contribute to public safety in that way. So the site is within the Shoreland Overlay District and has proposed to retain the Shoreland Overlay District zoning overlay. And I just wanted to draw your attention to the fact that the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District submitted a letter citing some concerns about proximity to the lake, and that the shoreline overlay limits all structures to 35 feet. So that brings me to a couple of conditions of approval related to the shoreline overlay: that the chimney stacks be limited to 35 feet, and that the final plans shall demonstrate how the project will
Just a reminder, we should make sure that everyone has their phones silenced so as not to distract the meeting. Sorry about that.
So just that the applicant shall work with CPED to ensure that appropriate stormwater management is taking place on site both during and after construction, soils are being stabilized during construction, and that those chimney stacks need to be limited to 35 feet. And so staff is recommending approval of all applications. There are some conditions of approval that you'll find in your staff report, specifically those related to the shoreline overlay, and I will stand for questions.
All right, commissioners, are there any questions of staff? Commissioner Rockwell, did you have a question? No? Okay. Anyone else? If there are no questions, I'll open the public hearing on this item. I'd like to ask the applicant to speak first, if there is someone here on behalf of the applicant. Yes, and please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Maggie Tarr, and then my address is 3036 Westlake Street, Minneapolis, Minnesota. I'm speaking on behalf of my client, Brian Farrell. We initially started this project as an accessory dwelling unit project, but due to the limitations of only one accessory dwelling unit per lot, we met with the city to see if we could change the zoning or how to make this go forward. So that's kind of how this project came to be. We feel strongly about it because right now it's kind of a dilapidated old house with dead trees and facing an alley. So we really wanted to bring more walkability to the alley. So we felt that putting eyes on the alley, putting more units on the alley would allow a greater aesthetic for that space.
All right, thank you. And commissioners, are there any questions of the applicant? If there are none, we can move on to some other speakers. So yes, please come to the microphone, state your name and address for the record.
I'm Lauren Mecha. I live at 4334 Westlake Harriet Parkway. My home is 2 lots to the south of this property, and we share a common alley. So I've talked with the owner, with Brian. I've talked with the architects. I want you to know that I am in support of adding density I purchased my home on that highly dense block, in fact, probably the most dense block in Linden Hills, knowing that we were embedded within multi-structured housing. However, that block is all R1. It presents as single family homes, overlooks the lake. And my concern with this project is the upzoning 3 steps to R4. When this project, it's my understanding, could be done with R3. And I spoke with Lindsay last week about this. My understanding is that this could be done R3 with 3 additional variances. Well, there are already so many variances to cram this project into that narrow space. I don't think adding an additional 3 is that significant. My understanding, again, is that it would be an additional $1,500. Well, $1,500 to preserve the shoreland overlay seems like a small price to pay. But I stand in support of Brian, the owner, because he was given the wrong information at the outset of this project. With the initial measurements done by the city, it indicated R4. Well, that was an erroneous measurement. With the new and correct measurement, an R3 is a viable option. So I stand with Brian in wanting him to be able to move forward with this project, and I respectfully ask you to consider R3. And because he was given incorrect information from the city, I would also ask that you respectfully mitigate that $1,500 fee for the 3 additional variances. The neighbors are confused. I want you to know that. The neighbors up, and because of the weather, many people couldn't be here. And in fact, I had to put on my snow boots and park 5 blocks away and run here to get here. But the neighbors are confused. You know, we were told R4, and now we realize it could be R3. We have not been given enough time. We feel like this is being jammed. This is being pushed through without good analysis of this project. And as a homeowner, 2 doors down, I will tell you, I'm very, very concerned about an R4 going up on the block on Lake Harriet. And while the current owner claims that he will not sell or raise the building and put in a 4-story building, who's to say that zoning at R4 doesn't incentivize somebody else to do that in the future? And it's not in keeping with the shoreland overlay. I would like to say that an R3 zoning is a win-win proposal. Brian gets to build his new dwelling unit. The city maintains the shoreland overlay height requirements, and the neighbors are pleased with the building on the block. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And is there anyone else who would like to speak on this item, item 7? If there's no one, I will close the public hearing. And commissioners, we have, let's see here, 8 applications before us. Are there any further questions, or would someone like to start things off with a motion? First, we have item A, the rezoning. Commissioner Rockwell.
Just one more point of clarification for Lindsay regarding the commenter's questions or points about the shoreline overlay. With the shoreline overlay applies regardless of the zoning, right? And your proposed condition would ensure that we are in fact meeting all of the conditions of the shoreline overlay with this project, and that would continue to exist if there were ever a redevelopment.
That's correct. I believe some of the neighbors have expressed concern that in the future someone could apply for a conditional use permit using a base R4 as justification for a taller height. Here.
But that building would still be, that application would still be subject to a shoreline overlay, and so they'd have to
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
Vary from that. Okay.
So as it stands now, the height limit for the structure would have to comply with the requirements for the cluster development and shoreland overlay, both of which are 2.5 stories or 35 feet.
Right.
And so the 4-unit cluster development that's proposed for the site right now, a future project would be, even with a variance to lot area, would be limited to 7 units due to the size of the lot.
And to 7 units and 35 feet.
Yes.
Right.
Even with a variance. So just,
Yes.
Thinking
Yeah.
about the future of what could be in that space.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, any further questions, or would someone like to start things off with the motion? Commissioner Rockwell.
I will move adoption of staff recommendations on A through H with all of the associated recommended conditions.
We have a motion to approve items A through H with all stated conditions. Is there a second? We have a motion and a second. Commissioner Rockwell.
Just briefly, I think I hear the concern, and I know that this commission just recently took the Shoreline Overlay District very seriously in an application by Lake Harriet. I think there are, the different lakes and the different areas in our city have different characters, and Lake Harriet's that is, I think, a very important piece, and it has a very different feel than the Mississippi River or Lake McCoska. And so I feel confident that the commission and councils in the future, if there were ever redevelopment here, to Lindsay's point, would be constrained on their unit size, but also would be constrained by these bodies on the existing height limits.
All right, thank you. Is there any further discussion? We have a motion and a second to approve items A through H. Hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Cruiser?
Aye.
Magrino?
Aye.
Rockwell?
Aye.
Schrader?
Aye.
Slack?
Aye.
Sweezy?
Aye.
6-0.
And that motion carries. That concludes our discussion on item 7. Next, we'll move on to our final item for discussion tonight, item 9, Sons of Norway. Staff is Mr. Crandall.
Good evening, Commissioners. Peter Crandall, Senior City Planner with CPED Land Use. The application before you is located at several parcels fronting on Westlake Street, Humboldt Avenue South, Holmes Avenue South, and 31st Street West. This is an application for a planned unit development. You'll see here from the zoning map that the proposed sites are zoned under 2 different zoning classifications, the C3A and the R4. The project site today is occupied by the Sons of Norway office building along West Lake Street, and the rest of the site is largely occupied by surface parking. The site shares the block with several single and 2-family homes and an additional apartment building in between the Sons of Norway and the surface parking lot to the south. For some land use context, this shows the subject site in relationship to the larger neighborhood. It's adjacent to the Uptown Activity Center, and the northern edge of the site fronts along the West Lake Street commercial corridor. On this site is under the small area plan guidance of the Uptown Small Area Plan, adopted in 2008 by the Minneapolis City Council. This is the future land use map from that plan, which shows the site as guided for mixed use along the Lake Street corridor and medium density housing along the southern parcel of the site. And the plan also defines the proposed development intensity as urban oriented in relationship to two other intensity characterizations, neighborhood oriented and transit oriented. The Uptown Small Area Plan contains a lot of guidance about building envelope and the architectural relationship of new development to existing development and existing housing in the neighborhood. In particular, places a lot of emphasis on transitions between larger scale new development towards the core of the neighborhood, towards the lower scale elements of the surrounding neighborhoods. The proposed development is for a 319 unit mixed use project. This is a planned unit development with 23,000 square feet of commercial uses. As you can see from the aerial here, the project is made up of 3 primary building masses, 2 along Lake Street and Humboldt Avenue are defined as 7 stories per the zoning code definition of height. And then there's a south building on the southern parcel facing Holmes Avenue. That would be a proposed 5-story structure. This is a rendering of a previous proposal that you saw at the Committee of the Whole some number of months ago. And you'll notice that some modifications have been made to the proposal before coming before you tonight. Most significantly, that southern building has been reduced from 6 stories to 5 stories. There's also been some exterior building material changes. So this is showing that original condition along Holmes Avenue South with the 6-story proposal, and then the proposal before you tonight, which is 5 stories for that southern building parcel. So the land use applications before you are a rezoning from R4 to R6. That's for the south parcel along Holmes Avenue South. Conditional use permit for a planned unit development. As the Commission is aware, a conditional use permit or a planned unit development rather allows the applicant to ask for certain exceptions to the zoning rules in exchange for amenities. The exceptions that this application is asking for are to allow more than one principal structure on the site, to increase the building height, to reduce the minimum required yard requirements, and then an exception to the pedestrian-oriented overlay district requirement. The PO district applies only to the C3A portion of the project. There's a variance to increase the maximum lot coverage, the site plan review application, an alley vacation, and then a preliminary and final plat. This is the site plan. You can see the several proposed buildings on the site. They are clustered around a public open space at the center of the site that connects to West Lake Street under what will be understood by the city as a skyway connecting the 2 north building masses. For the purposes of the staff report and the application, the project has been broken into the north building and the south building. They're analyzed somewhat differently given the zoning designations on those 2 portions of the site. As I stated before, the north building portion of the site is zoned for the C3A Community Activity Center District, and the south portion of the site is currently zoned for the R4. The applicant is seeking an application to rezone that portion of the site to R6. A little bit of analysis about the differences between the R4 and the R6 zoning classification for that southern portion of the site. The lot area for that portion of the site is approximately 48,000 square feet. Under the current R4 zoning, the maximum density requirement, which is 1,250 square feet per dwelling unit, would be 38 units. The maximum FAR would be 1.875. That's with a 25% density bonus for enclosed parking. The maximum height under the R4 is 4 stories or 56 feet. Under the proposed R6 zoning, R6 does not have a density requirement. The maximum FAR would be 3.6. Again, that's with a 25% bonus for enclosed parking. And the the maximum height under R6 would be 6 stories, 84 feet. And to clarify, the applicant's proposed FAR for the south portion of the building is 2.88. So, and 5 stories, 59 feet, both of which are under what would be approvable in the R6 and over what would be approvable in the R4, although only slightly in the case of the height. This is a figure showing the proposed alley vacation, which is highlighted in the black hatch on the northern portion of the site. And then an exhibit illustrating the proposed amenities that the applicant is proposing for gaining the exceptions to the zoning code. Those include a public open space at the center of the site, a plaza. They're also meeting the requirements for active liner uses in the parking garage. And in addition to those, they're proposing several pedestrian improvements, including that additional connection to West Lake Street, enhanced exterior lighting, and a recycling storage area, which together would meet the required amenity points for those zoning exceptions. There's a landscape plan showing some of the pedestrian enhancements and landscaping enhancements to the site. Some of the landscape amenities, there'll be at least 2 outdoor fireplaces in that interior courtyard space. And then the lighting plan showing some of the pedestrian scale lighting on the interior and around the exterior of the site. The project is proposing to have an enclosed parking garage that spans the entirety of the site at a subgrade level, so 1 level of underground parking and then 1 level of at-grade parking for the southern portion of the building. I won't go through all of the floor plans, but this is the site plan for the north portion of, the north building. You'll notice that the commercial uses are concentrated along West Lake Street, the adopted commercial corridor. There is a proposed retail space in the somewhat rounded portion of the building at the corner of Humboldt and West Lake Street, an additional retail space across the plaza from that on the ground level, and then an office space at the corner of Holmes and West Lake Street that will be occupied by the current tenant of the Sons of Norway building. And then on the Humboldt-facing portion of that building, there are proposed walk-up residential units facing both Humboldt and the interior public open space. Elevations of the north building. Primary exterior materials are brick, stone, and fiber cement. Some metal panel. This is the rendering of the south building as seen from 31st. Again, that subgrade level of enclosed parking stretches between the two, both the north and the south building. And then this is the site plan showing that level of enclosed at-grade parking in the south portion of the project. That enclosed parking is lined with walk-up residential units facing 31st and Holmes Avenue South. And then the primary entrance to both the at-grade enclosed parking and the subgrade enclosed parking is off of Holmes Avenue South. Elevations of that portion of the building. Again, primary materials are brick, fiber cement, and metal panel. Staff has recommended a condition of approval with regard to this portion of the building that the applicant
simplify the material palette to bring the three portions of the building further in line with each other to present a more unified design scheme versus having three or rather two different material palettes for this portion of the building. So again, in summary, the applications are the rezoning, the conditional use permit for plan unit development, variance to increase the maximum lot coverage, and I should specify that that variance is for the south portion of the project specifically, and that variance, I believe, is from 70%, which is the maximum under the proposed R6, to 80% lot coverage. The site plan review, the alley vacation, and the preliminary and final plat. I don't believe I mentioned this, and there was a mistake in the staff report, but there are a total of 323 parking spaces, enclosed parking spaces, proposed as a part of the project. And that is broken down somewhat from standard to compact spaces. I will conclude my presentation there and take any questions.
Okay, commissioners, are there any questions of staff? Commissioner Kronzer.
A couple of quick questions. Is there a bus shelter on the site?
There is not a proposed bus shelter as a part of the project, no.
Is it? But there is a current Metro Transit bus shelter.
I'm not aware of that, but perhaps the applicant can confirm that.
Okay, thank you. The curb line along Holmes, it kind of stepped in on the northern part of the block and then flares out. Is that the existing curb line, or is that something that's being proposed?
Sorry, can you specify that one more time?
Right in the middle where it says Holmes Avenue, see where the curb angles back?
Mm-hmm.
Is that the existing curb line that's just being rebuilt?
I'll ask the applicant to confirm that. I'm not sure if that's the way that the curb is structured today. I believe with the amount of landscaping enhancements that they are doing, that they'll be reconstructing the blocks. So it's possible that's a new condition.
Okay. And then last question, in the PO district, what's the window sill height maximum for a storefront?
I believe it's 2.5.
2.5 feet?
Mm-hmm. For the uptown one specifically.
All right. Any further questions of staff? If there are none, I'll open the public hearing on this item. I'd like to ask the applicant to speak first, so please come to the microphone and state your name and address for the record. Let us know if there's anything you'd like to add to the staff presentation.
Chair Brown, bear with us. We're going to have a couple slides to add as well. What's my name of it for? What's the name? Chair Brown, members of the Plan Commission, my name is Tony Barranco from Ryan Companies. My address is 4716 Colfax Avenue South in Minneapolis in the Lyndhurst neighborhood. I'm joined tonight by a couple of my colleagues to my right, Katie Breenstra and Carl Drektra, and one of my associates from their civil engineering department, Chad Lockwood, behind us. Katie, Carl, and Chad have all been with me as we've engaged in the neighborhood process the last 6 or 7 months. And so I thought it would be important to have them here as well. On behalf of our project team, Sons of Norway, Ryan Companies, and Widener, pleased that you're here with us, and want to thank Sons of Norway for their trust in helping us figure out what to do with their parcel in the next generation of Sons of Norway. Also want to thank and acknowledge the neighbors that have come out and participated in numerous open houses, neighborhood meetings, and others. We've conducted over or attended over a dozen meetings with ECHO, with Wedge, with the Uptown Association, and other stakeholders and neighbors in the area as we've gathered feedback about the project, being hopeful to communicate the impacts of what this development may do. A couple special thanks. Monica Smith from ECHO and Susie Goldstein have done a lot to coordinate meetings, and so I want to express my gratitude for their coordination and the time we've spent. I also want to acknowledge the fact that this is a large site and a site that's effectively been in its same form for 50 years. And in a fully developed urban city in a great pocket like Uptown, certainly this is one thing we wanted to get in front of, and that's why we got in touch early with the neighbors. I also found out personally there's no better way to bring a community to get together than to find a site like this and to bring a development plan. So I appreciate you listening. A couple things about current conditions. Oops. You know, the Sons of Norway site sits on about 2.3 acres of undeveloped property right now. It's currently, the majority of it is surface parking. Many of it hasn't been repaired for the last 2 decades. And there is an antiquated office building that's on one corner of the site. As described in the staff report, a couple of the project goals that this will accomplish, we'll be cleaning up a site that has a long history of contamination, including some gas station and other uses prior to its existence as Sons of Norway. We'll put this and turn it into an active mixed-use project that will have retail, office, housing, parking, and community green space. We'll provide an active stormwater management plan on a site that currently has no active stormwater controls in it. We'll be allocating over 15,000 square feet of space for community-oriented green space between our fjord and what we hope will be Uptown's new backyard, our 12,000 square foot green space in the back of our project. We'll also create some important new housing options as the city tries to think about and deal with a number of residents that will be moving to Uptown or moving to Minneapolis and neighborhoods like Uptown in the next few decades. Obviously, this project adds tax-based employment jobs, park dedication fees, and other great things, but also it retains an important daily employer in Uptown, Sons of Norway, that has enjoyed being in Uptown for almost 80 years. And really our goal is to re-energize and support them in building anew on a great site. To address a couple of Commissioner Kronzer's questions, there is a Metro Transit bus shelter on the site that's currently located just a little bit east of the intersection of Humboldt and Lake. We are working with Metro Transit to look at the location of that and whether or not we should keep it in its current spot or move it slightly to the east. And we're engaged in active conversations with Metro Transit, as well as with the city of county based on the broad road improvements that are happening within Uptown. Since the committee of the whole project that we attended in October, we have made some changes in response to the neighborhood feedback that we've gotten. We wanted to share with you some of those. I'll try not to go past some of the comments that Peter had in his staff report. I wanted to make sure to highlight these since our last visit. First of all, one of the things that we've been trying to do is, in keeping with the spirit of Uptown, we've been trying to keep the building focused on small bits of density, as opposed to doing a large monolithic mass of building. We're looking at breaking it into smaller pieces to keep some individual style and character, which are really customary in and around Uptown. In order to address one of the big neighborhood concerns that we've had, we made a big decision to reduce an entire story of the south building of the site. As Peter described, we heard a lot of feedback that the transition to the neighborhood as addressed in the small area plan was not being met with the prior plan. And we're hopeful that a meaningful move and reduction of height in that area will take strides to do that. We also changed our roof line on the south building of the site. Some of you may have remembered that we came with a mansard style roof. There are mansard conditions both on the north and south of that. We ended up swapping to a more traditional straight roof line with a more simple cornice because it was one of those elements that we had a few folks that liked it, but many came and didn't like that style and condition. To further reinforce a step back along 31st, we've also lowered the corner features into a softer bay expression. If you'll notice on the plan on the board, you can see both on the east and the west side of the site, we have taken out the corners to further reduce the visual impact of these buildings. One of the other notable items that we've added, we purchased or have agreed to purchase the 3014 Homes apartment building that's on the site. You'll note that it is not included in the application, and it's not our intention to do anything but keep the building in its current form. We feel as though buildings like that provide an important option for naturally occurable affordable housing in our city. It also provides a great staccato character of the different design features that are prevalent in and around Uptown. A couple of other big changes that we've had since our last submittal. We really simplified our color palette. In the prior plan, we had different brick colors. We had a very white brick along Lake Street and a corner feature that was actually clad in metal or copper. We've simplified both to a stone, and we've kept the white brick. And the building that, as it curves alongside Humboldt, we had in a gray shimmery brick. We've matched that to the front building to be in white. So we've reduced a couple different materials out to really simplify that. I'd also note that we've heard staff's comments related to further simplification of the building in the south, and we're open to working with staff on making sure that project has a consistent exterior. Since our last plan, we've had a small reduction in our unit count from 325 units to 319. We've also done some significant enhancement of our ground level programming, some images which I'm able to show you today. I'm certainly interested in your comments after this testimony as to whether or not some of these objectives have been achieved. Well, there have been fewer neighborhood comments related to our building in the north. The bulk of the comments that we have received are comments related to the building in the south. And as you've seen in your emails, and I'm sure you'll hear tonight, we've been actively engaged in a conversation regarding our decision to proceed with an R6 rezoning of the area that's currently R4. We understand that the goal of this is to make sure that we have achieved an appropriate transition of the community, and we believe as though we've done so with this plan. What we are proposing in the current south building is a 59-foot high building. Our building contains about 138,000 square feet of space, and the delta that we're talking about compared to our R4 zoning is a 56-foot high building that, if you calculate your density bonuses in there, could be a building that's about 100,000 square feet. So what we're really talking about is the request to add about 38,000 square feet of building area and 3 feet of height to that building. The reason why we're making this request is because we feel as though the community benefits of the green space that we're adding far outweigh this request for additional density disproportion on that site. We could make a decision to carry more density over in and on the C3 area. We just don't think that that's the best plan for the project and or for the community, and that's why we're making this request. A few things I'd like to note, as you'll see on your monitors, what we've outlined in a gray box here represents what could be built as of right under R4 zoning with the density bonuses allowable. And again, this reflects a building that's about 100,000 feet and 56 feet in height. You'll see our building in the backdrop of it, and you'll notice that the differences of what sticks out in and beyond that gray box are fairly subtle compared to what we could build under an R4. This is a same shot, but in elevation to show. One more graphic that shows a before and after. This is currently taken from south of 31st Street, looking up homes and looking at the building. Now, keep in mind that just to the right of this picture is the De La Pointe project. That's 81 feet at its peak. And so in terms of this gradual transition of the neighborhood, you can see that we are working toward a step down, both from Lake to the north and from De La Pointe to the east. I'll take 1 minute to address the small area plan, and then I'll open it up for questions. You know, one of the documents that was referenced and discussed quite a bit in our public meetings was the small area plan. The small area plan was one of the first documents that we sought guidance from as we began the development process. And as stated on page 68 of that plan and reinforced in the staff report, buildings on the south side of Lake Street should contain residential entrances and limited retail, and step down in scale as they approach the existing residential. Our plan has throughout taken seriously that guidance, and we're confident that we've made adjustments to achieve the intent of the plan. A couple other things I'd like to note about the plan. The plan itself does not provide mandates for zoning. It is a tool that guides the underlying development, and we feel as though, again, we're achieving that intent of the gradual transition. Work for the small area plan began in 2006, adopted February 1, 2008, about 10 years ago. This is before we've seen a significant transition in development within our city. Before significant urbanization trends that have happened, the decade between 2000 and 2010 saw the greatest increase of residents in the city of Minneapolis since the 1920s. We also started this plan before the creation of things like Uber and Lyft, before Twitter, before the iPhone, and before other major disruptors that affect the way that people get around town and certainly live, work, and play within cities like Minneapolis. And again, while we are looking for additional density on the R6 site, we've carefully weighed the community benefit of adding in our green space and looking at all the other project components. And we feel as though this is the best for the city and for the area. Finally, I'll just provide a couple visuals as our plans have progressed, just to show where we've come in terms of design. This is a view that looks southward from homes and what would replace the current existing surface parking lot. This is a current view of the area that will become the fjord, which is the split between the masses on Lake Street. You'll notice that this is intended to be a retail-lined, open public area. We envision that there be a coffee shop or restaurant on each side of this, and people able to go back and forth between here and the rear area. Here's a night shot that shows the green space in the back of the fjord, and a winter condition when we freeze over the green space into a seasonal ice rink and curling court. Here's one more visual looking from the bottom left corner, shows you looking from the south to the north. The right side from the south to the north, and the other two images are looking from the north to the south down the fjord area. So with that, I am here to tell you I'm really excited about this. As a resident of the city, we get few opportunities to have the opportunity to submit a project that really changes a neighborhood. And we think that this is going to become the new backyard of Uptown. And while it is a big change, and we're acknowledging that, I can't tell you how excited we are to bring this project forward for your consideration.
All right, thank you. Commissioners, are there any questions of the applicant? If there are none, we can move on to some other speakers. And I know there are a lot of you who are here to speak on this item tonight. I will ask that I won't enforce a strict time limit, but I will ask that you keep your remarks to just about a couple minutes. If you start to go longer, I might ask you to wrap up. Also be mindful of providing new information, not simply repeating things that others have said. I'll note we received a large stack of emails and have had the opportunity to go through those as well. So I'll ask for an initial public hearing period of about 45 minutes. We can see how things go and decide if we need to extend it beyond that. But you can decide who goes first, and please come to the microphone. Each person will need to state their name and address for the record.
My name is Susie Goldstein. I'm a Echo resident, a homeowner in East Calhoun. I live at 1805 West Lake Street, and I am currently the livability chairperson for the Echo board. As you know, East Calhoun is a neighborhood that is highly desirable in Uptown, made up of single and multifamily dwellings. It's a uniquely vibrant part of our city, balancing a long-established neighborhood on the shores of the lake with a vibrant commercial and entertainment area. In an effort to control and plan the evolution of this area, the Uptown Small Area Plan was created. This plan took special care to identify where denser developments should occur and how to integrate increased density with the surrounding neighborhood. Managing the transitions between stable residential neighborhoods and ever-changing corridors is the essence of the small area plan. This proposal for the Sons of Norway parcel seeks to build a new 7-story, 319-unit mixed-use development. The ECHO Board has voted against approving this project twice in both of its forms. There's a letter that went out to neighbors that I think should be in your packet, also postcards that should also be part of your packet. The physical effect on the neighborhood of this proposed building massing with the rezoning from R4 to R6 will not only create a canyon effect on Holmes Avenue, but will dramatically increase traffic and increase the population of Echo by approximately 25%. We're adding 500 new residents into 1 square block. We are currently experiencing excessive traffic, a lack of on-street parking, poor air quality due to idling, as well as rents increasing out of reach for most of Minneapolis residents now. Echo is made up of 76% of renters. Our only affordable housing is what we have right now in Echo, and it's not very affordable. How does this development with proposed rents starting at $1,000 for 374 square feet for an efficiency accomplish our new mayor and the city council's stated goal of affordable housing in all areas of Minneapolis? Such a huge development requires rezoning from R4 to R6, a conditional use permit, and a PUD to achieve the developer's desired density for the project's economic viability. Doesn't it make more sense to hold to the current zoning, honor a true transition to the established neighborhood, and go back to the drawing board with a plan that makes this development a win for both the city and for the current Echo neighbors? Peter Crandall's staff report states, reasonable uses exist for the property in question that are permitted under the existing zoning classification, including medium density housing. I ask you to consider this question. In approving this rezoning, granting a PUD, granting a variance for increased maximum lot size, can you give rationale as to why these changes are in anyone's best interests? Who does this project serve? It doesn't serve those who need affordable housing. It doesn't serve current, longtime taxpayers, homeowners, and renters in Echo who will see the population increase by up to 500 new residents. It doesn't serve those who travel on Lake Street via car, on foot, or bike, traveling through the Hennepin and Lake intersection, notorious for pedestrian accidents, and also known as being one of the busiest intersections in the state of Minnesota. I ask you to send this project back to the developer to comply and honor the Minneapolis Plan for Sustainable Growth, the Uptown Small Area Plan, and consider the desired goal of affordable housing in all parts of Minneapolis. Again, reasonable uses exist for the property in question that are permitted under the existing zoning classification, including medium density housing. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And next speaker, please. All right, I'll ask that you refrain from applause between speakers. Next speaker, please state your name and address.
Good afternoon. My name is Laura Norcus Crampton, and I live at 3149 James Avenue South. I'm a 25-year resident of East Calhoun neighborhood. And can I use this overhead for?
Yeah, go ahead. You can just set your page on there.
So I guess first I want to just talk about, the zoning, and I also want to talk about the existing context right now, just so we know what we're talking about. I don't know if many of you are familiar with the streets surrounding this project. So this proposal is outside of the activity center. And I'm just going to show a few pictures here. Sure. Is this right side up for you guys? Okay, so this shows directly across the street from this project proposal on 31st Street. This, you can't quite see, but in the middle there is a boulevard. There also is, the first building is a duplex, another duplex, fourplex. So this is all sort of, the density that's been incorporated in our neighborhood for a very long time. if you look at the north side of 31st Street, you could see that there's a boulevard down the middle. Everything here is for traffic calming. And these are supposed to be fingers of green extending from the parkland into the neighborhood. If you go on the east side of Hennepin, you'll see that there's a lot of new street throating. Again, traffic calming, so people don't just use that residential street as an entrance ramp to 35W. So there's been a lot of effort for livability to bring a lot of people here. This is a regional draw, of course, because of the lakes and because of Uptown. Finally, if you look further down, homes, this is basic, these are duplex, most of these are duplexes and some single family homes. So again, we have a lot of integrated density into the neighborhood. We are not opposed to renters. We are not opposed to density. But what we want to really see is some planning that makes things work for everyone. Now, I just cited some zoning stuff here. I just want to make it clear that it isn't just a small area plan that talks about medium density on the 31st Street site. As 1.10.5. So what the small area plans did, just so we're clear, so everybody understands, is that it was a way to articulate the comprehensive plan to every unique context of the city. So what we tried to figure out through the Uptown plan is how to apply the principles and the goals of the comprehensive plan to our unique context, just like every other neighborhood did. And so, and we won an American Planning Association Award for Excellence for integrated density into an existing neighborhood. So first we see the encouraged development of high density housing on commercial corridors. And that is what we've got on Lake Street. We're not happy about the height. We think it's excessive, but that is, the zoning does support some high density there. But it also says encourage the development of medium density housing on properties adjacent to properties on commercial corridors. So this is where the R4 zoning came from to begin with. It was to be in compliance with the comprehensive plan. And so medium density residential at R4, that's about 35 units per acre, dwelling units per acre. Medium density is 20 to 50 with a PUD bonus or whatever, you're still in the ballpark. So that it's not just the scale, it's the impact of this development on traffic, on air quality, on just busyness, on safety, trying to get across streets. And frankly, these are residential streets. We don't have really good ways to move that much traffic through our neighborhood. And then we also have to preserve the stability and diversity of the city's neighborhoods while allowing for increased density to attract long-term residents. Well, unfortunately, the scale and the price point of these, Susie mentioned 1,000. I've heard anywhere from 1,000 to 1,200 as a beginning price. And the smallest units are 375 square feet. And then we have a bunch that are like 500 square feet. So if you do, again, the affordable housing is the stuff we have, it's the housing that we have now. So these other findings just talk about promoting the growth and encourage overall city vitality, focusing on the corridors, but also respecting the transitions. And that was always the main concern. Nobody wanted to say, look, we don't want any growth in Uptown. What we wanted to do is, and the way Mayor Ryback, when he funded the plan, said, this is the three-legged stool. A vibrant commercial district, a well-appointed, an established residential district, and then the park system. So for the sustainability for that and how that all tied together, and that we need to have all of them to make Uptown work for everyone. So anyway, that basically covers everything on here. The other thing I just wanted to mention was, if you look at the average rental rate, there's been a lot of discussion about affordable housing, and we support that. But for instance, the average rental rate for a studio in Minneapolis is $957 a month for a 500 square foot. That's $1.88 per square foot. A lot of the duplexes in Echo are at 1,000 square feet and right around $1,800. That's again $1.80 per square foot. So, but the rental rate for studios in this thing, if we're talking the rates that they've mentioned in several public meetings, we're up to $303.20 per square foot. So you can say that individual unit is affordable, but you can't get a roommate in a 375 square foot place. So it seems to us, it's kind of moving things in the wrong direction. It's making our neighborhood more exclusionary. And what we're worried about, if this is the base rent for a unit this size, what does this do to rents everywhere else going up? It's going to push things up. And not only in Echo, it's going to push it in other parts of Uptown, and through other parts of the city. So what we're really opposing the rezoning, because we feel like this just sort of feeds speculative interest, not long-term interest. There's been a lot of studies. If you guys follow Collier's magazine, they have an international. They did a big focus on Minneapolis and St. Paul, how we're really ripe for national and international speculators. these speculators tend to turn properties over much faster. There's a lot of data about all this stuff, and they were saying what was once a fairly stable 500 million to 750 million annual apartment sales, it's doubled since 2013, and they don't see any pullback in sight. And they have like 3 pages of sales that have gone on. A lot of them are buildings that have been built since 2010. So what we're asking is, you know, to keep with reasonable, similar to what we talked about on the Lyndale project, you know, figure out what's reasonable. We'd like some moderate increases in density. We'll have other people talking about parking and traffic and things like that. So what we're trying to do is figure out what can be win-wins, what can work for everyone, what can allow more people to be in our community, but in a way that doesn't trash the community and also push rents in a direction that none of us want. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. And next speaker, who would like to go next? Please state your name and address for the record.
Name and address? Okay. My name is Blue Delaquani. I'm at 3404 Emerson Avenue South. I am a freelancer, which is why I've been able to spend an hour on a bus to get here. I am a renter, and I have lived in both the Wedge neighborhood and Carrick for the last 5 years, and I would like to continue to do so as long as I'm not pushed out. I would like to talk about being in support of the proposed upzoning from R4 to R6 for the Sons of Norway redevelopment. This is already an extremely livable neighborhood and as has been brought up earlier, the amount of areas that are available to turn into, you know, triplexes or areas similar to triplexes are slim. There are not a lot of opportunities to create more spaces in this area, the uptown area, for increased apartments. And it is not easy for people like me, professionals who, you know, maybe 1 out of 5 of us have a car, to continue to afford living in uptown. It gets harder all the time to find spaces that have rents within this range. I'm not going to be able to enjoy Muskoka and the other lakes if we keep getting pushed out of the neighborhood. I am in favor of this. Quite frankly, I think that, 323 parking spaces available under this proposal is more than sufficient for the amount of units and the suggested amount of renters that will be available. And I think this will not hamper the livability of the neighborhood as is, and will in fact be a great asset as this neighborhood is in transition, as we are, you know, discussing it. I think it is time to consider a, you know, serious development like this, especially for renters like myself who want to stick around for as long as possible and will likely not afford a home. So here we go. Thank you very much for your time.
All right, thank you. And is there anyone else? Yes, please state your name and address for the record.
Hi, my name is Christine Vincent. I live at 3125 Holmes Avenue South, apartment 201. I'm a renter. I've been a renter at this address for 27 years. I'm a full-time employee at the University of Minnesota. I work in the administration for the med school. I've been there for 13 years, and I'm a daily commuter by bus. I drive less than 3,500 miles a year. In the 27 years that I've been a part of ECHO, or I guess now East Muskoka, I have always felt welcome. I've always felt part of a community, despite the fact that I rent. I rent because I simply can't afford to buy in this neighborhood. I love my neighborhood, and I feel very deep ties to it. I signed my first lease shortly before my 21st birthday, spent all of my 20s, all of my 30s, and at this point, very nearly all of my 40s at this address. I used to work in the neighborhood, and I'm a regular customer at local businesses. I've laid down deep roots in this neighborhood. This is my home. This is the only home that I've really known as an adult. The result of the recent changes and the variances, the increased sort of luxury housing, the difference in rents that we're looking at in this new development are pretty significant for me. My building has been flipped twice in the last 3.25 years. It's a 28-unit building. My rent has gone up from $835 a month to $1,020 a month for a small one-bedroom apartment. This is a rate that, as a single middle-class gal working at the University of Minnesota, one of our leading employers, I can't compete. I can't. Over the last 3 years, I haven't had a 22% increase in my salary. This increase in rent has come with a reduction of services, a reduction of maintenance, and without any improvements to my apartment. It's made the building less livable. I am really concerned that the Sons of Nori project is bringing in a density in kind of an arbitrary manner that's not considering its effect on people like me who, this is affordable living for me. The Sons of Nori project is not affordable living for me. I don't know what else to do. I mean, if I want to stay in my neighborhood, I'm at the point where I need to get a part-time job to subsidize my rents. This is going to decrease the economic diversity of our neighborhood. If someone who's a middle-class working gal, full-time employee of the University of Minnesota can't afford a small one-bedroom apartment, I'm not certain, where we have to go with that in terms of this economic diversity. So what I'm asking you tonight, the City Planning Commission, I ask that you honor Code Policy 1.8 of the Minneapolis Plan for Sustainable Growth. This is, quote, to preserve the stability and diversity of the city's neighborhoods while allowing for increased density in order to attract and retain long-term residents and businesses. By maintaining the R4 zoning on the south side of this development, you'll help to honor this policy. You'll help to make this living in this neighborhood a possibility for someone like me, who is middle class, does not have a ton of money, does not have a second income, but is a pretty solid member of the community and wants to live in this neighborhood for another 27 years. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And next speaker, please state your name and address for the record.
Good evening. I'm Sharon Iden Corneo. I live at 3039 Humboldt Avenue South for the past 27 years. I'm one of the 5 homes that share the block with Sons of Norway. I'm addressing the planned unit development points requested by Ryan Companies and recommended by the city staff. The developer and the city's own staff apply the subjective point system, awarding the development 25 points. I'm here to share with you, by the city's own report, how this development only receives 2 points, 1 for enhanced exterior lighting and 1 for recycling. I support the ground level design of this building, residential, landscaping, office, retail. They would add to the neighborhood, but the recommended high density will destroy their own design elements. The proposed design has 323 parking spaces, the entrance suggested on Holmes Avenue. Due to the high density of the proposal, the city staff has recommended that the developer, and I quote, "We would prefer the access drive spanning between Holmes and Humboldt be two-way and that entrance to be to the underground parking off that drive. This will create a T traffic pattern within the block. The east and west exits of the parking ramp shared with the alley going south. Holmes and Humboldt are already gridlocked daily, so this will promote traffic down the alley behind the development and the 5 homes. The city planner refers to the current alley in their report, and I quote, "a shared street." The developer and the city planner award 3 points for pedestrian improvements. I quote, "Proposed design. Neighbors to the south of the site currently use the alley and the existing parking lots to access Lake Street and Lund's Barley store. This pathway, commonly referred as Lund's Alley. The subject will maintain the pathway through the site as an exceptional accessible pedestrian access connecting the alley to Lake Street through open space and plaza amenities. These amenities are intended to provide an enhanced pedestrian experience. It will be unsafe to walk around the building, let alone within the 3,000 block. The T traffic pattern does not promote walkability. The T traffic pattern does not protect the new residents of the development or the established neighborhood safety. It will be unsafe to walk, bike to the proposed retail space, ground level homes, outdoor space, and plaza. 20 points quickly goes away. The pedestrian amenity is now 0. In fact, due to the density of this proposal, it goes against Minneapolis Plan for Sustainable Growth Policy 110. Support development along the commercial corridors that enhance the street character, fosters pedestrian movement, expands the range of goods and services available, and improves the ability to accommodate automobile traffic. The amenities the Ryan is providing is for resale value only, not for the public good. The outdoor space and plaza will only be used by the residents. While the developer maximizes access to sunlight on their property, the development casts large shadows along the established neighborhoods to the east and the west side of the property. In winter months, these neighbors will receive less than 6 hours of sunlight per day by the city's own shadowing study. The development achieves a planned unit development score of 2. I'm for development of the Sons of Norway site, but only if it follows our own award-winning Uptown Small Area Plan and the city's own plan for sustainable growth policy 1.10.6 encourages the development of medium density housing on properties adjacent to the properties on commercial corridors. Keep this property, the current zoning, as R4 multifamily medium density. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please state your name and address for the record.
Okay. My name is Carol Dines. I live at 3245 Irving Avenue South, and I'm here to talk about the traffic study. The Minneapolis Plan for Sustainable Growth, last updated in 2016, states, ensure that land use regulations continue to promote development that is compatible with nearby properties, neighborhood character, and natural features, minimizes pedestrian and vehicular conflict, promotes street life and activity, reinforces public spaces, and visually enhances development. It also states that huge increases in car traffic from high-density development creates more pedestrian vehicular conflicts with increased public health concerns regarding the predicted large number of idling cars. I'd like to draw your attention to the 2-page review of the Wiedner-Ryan traffic study authored by Alan Klugman from Minneapolis Public Works, questioning conclusions and rationale for many aspects of this development. These questions should be addressed before the city can fully evaluate, much less approve, the proposed building of 323 units. One issue raised in this review of the traffic study is that it did not take into consideration seasonal traffic. Anyone who understands B'nai Makaska knows that our traffic is doubled in summer. We believe the traffic numbers are inherently biased because the traffic study was done mid-October and did not take into consideration much higher traffic from May to September. The lake and Uptown form a regional destination 5 months of the year for recreational activities. Many of those people bring boats, waterboards, canoes, coolers, strollers, and they park in our neighborhood. Moreover, Uptown hosts events all summer long: the Aquatennial, Bastille Day, Uptown Art Fair, Jazz Festival, Food Truck Festival, Greek Festival, along with almost weekly runs to raise money as fundraisers, drawing people from suburbs and St. Paul as well as within the city. There isn't time to go into all the questions and concerns raised in the traffic study review, but to highlight a few: high queues for cars waiting at lines and stop signs, a need for clarification on the allotted parking spaces for non-resident office workers, visitors, and how shared parking spaces will operate. Remember, the 323 parking spaces are also for the office workers, the restaurant. The numbers don't add up. They are anticipating average daily traffic for the restaurant of 398 trips in and out, but their shared spaces are only 30. So, or 31 or something like that. There's a lot of questions inherent in this traffic study that really need clarification. The traffic study, as is pointed out in Klugman's review, didn't take into consideration 2 new buildings. One is the De La Pointe building on the corner, and the other is a new building going up with micro units and only a third parking spaces for the number of tenants. They will be sharing the same street as the only exit and entrance into this huge development. It also raises questions about the flow of traffic in and out of that one exit on Holmes, whether it might create more congestion in the neighborhood. And the questionably high numbers for shared and bypass trips, which were automatically deducted in the traffic study but were never made clear. As has already been said, Echo is already a neighborhood that is 60 to 70% rental. And many of the renters live happily in duplexes, triplexes, and multifamily apartments, and they rely on on-street parking. If the Wiedner-Ryan project goes through with its current plan offering inadequate parking for renters, by the way, there's no visitor parking in their current plan, which was also brought up in Klugman's review. He said the 9 parking meters on Lake Street are not sufficient, that most buildings of this size should have visitor parking. So if the Wiedner-Ryan project goes through with its current plan offering inadequate parking for renters and their visitors, office workers, patrons of the restaurant, we believe the spillover will highly impact our neighborhood with parking issues and traffic and more congestions. More cars circling and looking for parking spots, adding to traffic congestion and poor air quality in the residential area around the lakes. We do not believe this development should be voted on without really clear answers and clarification regarding the concerns raised in the traffic review. Thank you.
Thank you. And next speaker, please state your name and address for the record.
Good evening. My name is Ryan Brown. I live at 1435 West 31st Street, an apartment right on the corner. So all those little side views you saw of the south building, that's what I look at. Well, actually right now I look at a surface parking lot. A couple of comments first about the staff plan. I'd like to say that I do like the diverse materials that are used on the south building as proposed by the developer. I think that provides additional visual interest. And I also like the point addressed that adding some parking access or directing the parking access onto Humboldt makes sense because both the north and south Humboldt are controlled intersections, whereas Holmes and 31st is a non-controlled intersection. But now to address the hot button. The project as a whole, I think, is visually interesting, unique, and distinct, like Uptown itself. In response to the neighbors' feedback, the developer took the time to redesign the proposed south building to reduce the height, which I believe does meet the Uptown Small Area Plan's requirement of transitioning from the activity center to the single-family residences and duplexes that predominate the Echo neighborhood. The Uptown Small Area Plan is, of course, a recommendation, and it is dated as it was created in 2008, and there have been numerous city policies adopted since that time. This is a spot that density makes sense. It is an area that is rich with amenities, both from shops and restaurants to the natural amenities at Verimakaska, and is adjacent to the activity center and located within blocks of transit, bikeways, and is in a highly walkable area. I would also like to reiterate or point out that 31st Street is part of the Minneapolis Bicycle Master Plan and will have dedicated bike lanes on it at some point in the future, further enhancing the access to alternative modes of transportation aside from driving. This project really does enhance and encourage walkability, not only for current residents, but also for the persons who would live at this building. Minneapolis needs housing. Adding more rental units will help meet the demand in the city, and as the city meets that demand, that will help ease rental price points that we see increasing currently. While there's no way to compel the developer to add designated affordable housing, I believe that this project, by adding additional supply, will help preserve existing naturally occurring affordable housing in areas of Uptown. The Echo neighborhood has very limited areas for development and, more importantly, for increasing housing due to its current zoning, which is predominantly single-family and duplexes. This project adds density in the right location for this neighborhood and for the Uptown Activity Center, opening access to more residents to a highly desirable area. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please state your name and address for the record.
Hi, thanks. My name is Heather Wolfsberg, and I live 3,300 Homes. I'm Echo, longtime Echo resident. And I want to encourage you to keep the current zoning, the R4, in place. And I have a young family. We've been in the neighborhood for a long time, and I'm raising my children there. And I'm concerned about the environmental impact of this density. I'm not against this project, and I see it as density, but I want appropriate density. And I think R4 will give us appropriate density. I'm concerned about that transition point on the south parcel, and making it integrate into Echo neighborhood. And I feel that, I have these two kids. I love to let them run free into Uptown. With this addition, this change from R4 to R6, it will be tripling the amount of units that can be in that parcel. And that's a lot more cars, a lot more people. And I don't think it's as safe. It's going to have backup problems with the traffic. As I said, they were just the traffic. I think it's a flawed study. And, being a mom and seeing this property go in, I just would like to see that there is some consideration to the character of the neighborhood and the homeowners and the renters be considered as well. We're not against density, and there's density happening in this area. You guys can't, there's an accumulative density with the other parcels on this proposed Norway, Sons of Norway, but also across the street with that micro apartment too. I'm a pragmatist. There's cars and there's going to be traffic, so please consider that. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And next speaker, please state your name and address.
My name is Jana Matson. I live at 3033 Humboldt Avenue South on the block in question with this proposed development. I have been an Uptown resident off and on, but primarily on for my entire life. I came home from Abbott Hospital to 32nd and Irving, and my parents were there for 47 years. Within the last few years, we all together moved to a duplex. I think it's a special situation. It's a multi-generational home. I feel very fortunate that we have that opportunity in a neighborhood that we have called home for so long and through generations. I care a lot about this neighborhood. There's deep roots there. Very active participants. It's always been a combination of history and new energy. And I love seeing how the new energy becomes the history, and on we go. So it is a constant element of change in Uptown. When we purchased this duplex, we knew this was, even though it's been a parking lot, and I learned how to ride my bicycle in that parking lot, we knew this was ripe for development and that made sense for where we need to go as a city, the health and vitality and the density of our urban environment. And I absolutely on board. I knew we'd be dealing with some construction at some point. What I do not appreciate about this proposal is what I see as really a complete disregard for the previously discussed small area plan, extensively invested by the neighbors in the city council, that I feel that they could do what they're trying to do within the existing zoning, that they could shift their density, that they could make it work and still respect the work that has already been done by the people who are so invested in living in this area. We do not want to lose what makes it a gem of a neighborhood. I've lived in San Francisco and Seattle and out east, and I come back to Minneapolis because of the character of this community and the neighborhoods we live in, the integration of the parks. And I don't understand why we have to have this density bomb in this one space that has the potential to disrupt the enjoyment of just those amenities, not only for the history and the people who've lived there, but for the new energy and the people that can come in. I think there are ways to bring in new people that don't diminish the experience we have of Uptown. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. Next speaker. Please state your name and address for the record.
My name's Eric Storley. I live at 3217 Humboldt South. I've lived there for 40 years. Came into the neighborhood when it was a very mixed neighborhood. We had an electrician down the street. I had a teenage runaway halfway house across the street on Lake Calhoun, now named Bede Makasa, if I've got that correct. We had a drug rehab facility. So I've spent some 40 years as a community college teacher, plowed much of that income into rehabbing a rundown house. And I urge you to keep the R4 zoning, to think carefully about adding 350 new residents to a neighborhood that has an existing character. Its very character is what's pulling in big money to develop things like this site without any concern for the livability of the neighborhood, for the neighbors, or for the long-term uses of the lake. I'd like to note that this so-called fjord will not become the new backyard of Uptown. That's the lake. That's the lake. So think very critically about these so-called amenities that will justify this kind of crowding. And I would call it crowding, not diversity. One last note, in the last 5, 6, 7 years, I've seen an explosion of high-rise apartments from Lyndale down Lake Street to Hennepin, out past the Calhoun Beach Hotel, into St. Louis Park. And right now, we already have congestion. This is not something that Ryan Company will create. It's there. They will simply make it worse. At this point, for me to take a trip after 3 o'clock, suddenly what used to be a 10 or 15 minute drive might be double or triple that. People are filling that area. This is the way it's going to be, and it will get worse unless you, gentlemen and lady, think carefully about what to permit by the developers who are coming in with big money, no interest in the communities that they are going into. Properties are being flipped and flipped again. So please reconsider or don't consider any upzoning and look very carefully at the PUD, at the variances requested. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Please state your name and address.
My name's Lee Todd. I live at 3139 Irving Avenue South. I've lived there for, we moved there in 1976 and pretty much continuously except for 8 years in California. I'm going to, as we've been going through this and working with Tony and the folks, it seems like I'm going to talk about message sending and economics. It seems like if I reconstruct this process, Sons of Norway decides to sell the site. Things been on there for a long time. And there's existing zoning in place. Tony and Wiedner proposed a price for that land and a project. Every time that we've talked to the developer, the indications are that if we stay within the existing zoning, it's not economical. We can't make it work. And I started thinking about that, and it occurred to me, where is their original cost? Well, it's in the cost of the land. So you pay a price for the land, and then you put a project together that makes economic sense considering how much you're having to pay for the property. Somehow or another, they've determined that in order to do that, they need an R6 zoning on the south end and a significant height variance on the north end. It seems to me that by accepting this, effectively the city is saying, they're sending a message to anybody that says, you don't need to worry about the existing zoning. Pay whatever you need, and you can get the project developed to your specification. I think that's a terribly dangerous precedent to set. And I ask you to consider staying with that integrity of the zoning. That's what it's for. The way you control development, you can control development through your zoning, and people will build very good projects within the constraints. I'm an engineer. You give me a problem, you tell me the constraints, my job is to figure out a way to make it work. These guys from Ryan are really smart. They could put beautiful stuff up there, but not within the current price. And I suspect that the price that's been negotiated for that land has a heck of a lot to do with what we're seeing. So please, give it a try. Hold that zoning, control it, and see what comes, because it may surprise you. Thank you very much. And I did ask all the people that are opposed, if you will, I would like you to stand up. And these are folks that came out on a really difficult night. And it doesn't even represent a tenth of the neighborhood. We canvassed the neighborhood. I talked to a lot of people, and so did all these folks. And the uniform opinion was that zoning should stay there. Let's see what comes. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And all right, and I did ask earlier that you refrain from applause. That has been ignored, I realize. How can I see a show of hands? How many of you would still like to speak on this item? I just wanted to check on the time. We have at least one or two more people, so we can continue on. You can come to the microphone and state your name and address for the record.
Hi, my name is Mike Davis. I live at 2450 Blaisdell Avenue, apartment 2, zip code 55404. But for the last 4 years, out of 22 of my life, I lived at the corner of 33rd and Holmes, where my folks have lived and owned a homes since 1978. It's going to be 40 years in September. I'm a young professional. I've lived all across the world in different cities, Chicago, Pittsburgh, London, Brazil. But everywhere I've gone, I've always considered Minneapolis home. And Minneapolis, for me, is uptown in Echo, 3 blocks south of Lunds. That's where I call home. And that's where I had a chance to live these past 4 years while I was working as a community organizer of racial and economic justice, and the past 2 as a student at the Humphrey School of Public Affairs at the University of Minnesota. I just want to, there's nothing more that I can say. I just want to be a person in front of you, a person of color, which there are very few, not only in this community, but here in this room today, to say, who is this development actually for? Who is it going to benefit? And the question is not about density. It's about what density is appropriate. And I think you've heard compelling arguments today that the proposed addition or the change of zoning is just not appropriate. It's just not right. It's not in line with everything that you've heard with today and with Mayor Fry, who I bumped into the building on the way into this hearing, and many on city council, so this leadership of the city. So I just ask you to maintain the current zoning as it is, as we will still see development and density happen in an appropriate and functional way. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. And we have at least, was there one more speaker? Yes, you can come to the microphone and state your name and address.
My name is Jack Zipes, and I live on 3245 Irving Avenue South. A retired professor from the University of Minnesota. My wife dragged me here from the East Coast to live in Siberia, and I'm still trying to adjust. And I must say that thanks to her, we found a place about 25 years ago in the Echo neighborhood. I just want to say that when I first moved here, the uptown was like a village. It's no longer like a village. It's sort of this glitzy, everything that I've come to dislike about New York, the gentrification, the glitzy apartment buildings, the higher rents and so on. But I don't want to talk about that so much. I don't want to talk about what's happened to Uptown. I could go on and on. I just want to say a very practical thing that I'm concerned about, particularly since I've just recently turned 80. I've had about, in just the last 3 to 4 years, about 5 accidents from cars that hit me and my dog in the area on 31st and quite close to Lake. Not only that, I've been hit by 2 bikes as well because of the congested traffic that has occurred, and that people no longer sort of take their time and are careful on the main streets, on Lake, and then on the off streets as well. So I'd like you to consider the fact that a development like this is definitely going to create more cars, more difficulty for pedestrians. I now quite often have to use a cane when I walk because of the accidents. And I just beg of you to really consider that we want this community is an amazing community, and we really want the very best, not only for our community, but for the city, because Uptown has always been a wonderful area to come to. But if it continues to develop the way it's being developed right now, it no longer will be the place to come to. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, is there anyone else who would like to speak? Yes. Come to the microphone and state your name and address.
My name is Mary Sabatke. I live at 3420 Irving Avenue South, and we've lived there for 35 years and 10 years before that in the Kerag neighborhood. I would just like to say, because I live sort of at the end of the neighborhood as opposed to right next to the development, what the impact we feel will be for us. And that is, as the gentleman just spoke, about the village of what Uptown is, partly. But traffic is an incredible concern in our neighborhood. And for those of you who maybe travel around in the summertime, you will know that people come to the lake and they don't ride their bike and they don't walk to the lake. Those of us who live in the neighborhood have that lucky to be able to do that. But other people come from outside and they park up and down our streets, in fact, in front of our driveway lots of times. So I think we have to understand what the impact of this development will be. And I think really what we talked about over and over again here is this transition to medium density on the 31st Street. 31st Street is a boulevard. It is not it should not be a traffic problem. And if they are going to be putting bike lanes on, it will also mean probably taking parking off on one side, which will make it even more problematic. So I really do encourage you to look at that traffic study, not this traffic study, but the public works person who did the comments about the traffic study, and to also have listened to and read all the materials I think that you've gotten from the neighbors. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone else with new information? Yes, please state your name and address.
My name's Eric Hendrickson. I live at 3045 Humboldt Avenue, have for the last 16 years with my wife, Anya, my daughter, Annabelle, and I'll get this short in 20 seconds. So all I would like to point out to the council is that at a previous project about an hour ago, you heard a woman get up and say, we're very confused about this project. The neighbors sort of wanted to go forward, but we don't know how to do what the right zoning is. I hope that it should be eminently clear at this point that, in fact, the people of Echo are not confused. Okay, 99% of us do not want you to approve the project that's before you right now. Everybody here wants something developed. We just don't want this project at this density. There is complete clarity here. Thank you.
And one last call. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? If there is no one, I will. Yes, please come to the microphone and state your name and address if you have some new information for us.
I would just like to add one point. My name is Tamara Kaiser, and I live at 3217 Humboldt. And the only thing I'd like to add to all the wonderful things my neighbors have already said is that the fjord amenity that is supposedly a public property in the plan is listed as a private public amenity. And as far as I know, as soon as the residents of that place complain because of unruly behavior from neighbors or other people coming in, that place will be closed down or is likely to be closed down. It is not a guaranteed public amenity. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And with that, I will close the public hearing. And thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. Commissioners, we have several applications before us, total of 6, starting, of course, with the rezoning. Are there any further questions of staff or of the applicant? Or would someone like to start things off with a motion? Commissioner Magrino.
Question for the applicant about the fjord, which I did laugh at the first time I heard about. Is there a way, how are you going to ensure that that is marked as public and that people are able to use it? Is it going to be clear walking by that that's a space that people are able to walk through and enjoy?
Sure, Chair Brown, Commissioner Magrino. The reason why it's labeled on the plans as a privately owned public space is for the designation. We wanted to make sure that the plan commissioners knew it was not being allocated to the city as parkland or park space. So it's a very precise definition, but it's important to know that it will be owned privately but publicly accessible. There won't be any fences or gates in and around it, and for that reason, it will remain publicly open.
And Commissioner Rockwell.
Before I sit down, Tony, what's the bike parking status? I'm sure it's in our packet. I couldn't find it.
I will get you the packet information. Commissioner Rockwell. Yeah, you have the breakdown. We have 183 total spaces within the project, including in the public and private, which is more than required in the code. Would you like a more detailed breakdown than that, Commissioner Rockwell?
No, thanks.
And Commissioner Slack.
I have a question for staff. Just for the record, can you explain what the project would look like if it maintained the R4 zoning versus the R6?
Sure. So as was presented in my presentation, and I believe the applicant had some visuals that kind of spoke to that issue, the R4 zoning has a somewhat lower FAR maximum. So we could expect that we would see some reduction in the floor area. It has a height restriction of 4 stories or 56 feet. The proposal is 5 stories, but just 3 feet over the maximum height limit. So while it would be limited to 4 stories, the height of the building under the R4 zoning would be or could be quite similar. Of course, there's the variance to the maximum lot coverage, which allows for some increased FAR also on the zoning district. If that were removed, you could expect to see a smaller building footprint. Those are the main differences. And then, of course, the density requirements. So while we might see anywhere from a 20 to 30% reduction in the gross floor area, we would see a significant reduction in the allowed number of residential units from what is the proposed 145 to, I believe, 38 under the R4. So.
Okay, any further questions? There are none. Maybe someone would like to start further discussion with a motion. We have 6 items, starting with item A, the rezoning. Commissioner Kronzer.
Thank you, President Brown. I'm going to try something a little unconventional. Well, why not? It's tonight, right? I want to move item B, the conditional use permit, at least 3 conditions. Let me just go over that, and I'll speak to that and why, what my thought process is behind that. So the motion is to approve the conditional use permit with adding 3 more conditions. The first condition is the south building shall be built with 3 distinct masses from the 2nd to 5th story, connected only by what we call these glass walkways on floors 2 through 5, matching in concept to the 5-story walkway on the north building. So maybe just comment on that. Something we talked about at the committee of the whole meeting, feels like a year ago, was to take those masses of the south building and actually break them up into 3 distinctive masses, only allowing them to be connected by a walkway, very similar to what you see in the renderings for the north building. What that does is allow light to transmit through that mass. That building is roughly 360 feet long, which is a very long building, too long in my mind, without some actual breaking of that massing above the 1st floor. So that would be condition 2. Condition 3, that the 5th floor of the south building be set back a minimum of 10 feet on all sides facing the public street. So that would be 31st and Holmes, which gets back to allowing light. It pulls more mass off of the public streets. The west side is already fairly articulated. It's, as we see it, it's in a capital E shape with pretty massive setbacks in parts of that building. But stepping back, that 5th floor, which is a common thing, either that is brought to us as a commission or applicants propose, I think is highly appropriate in this condition. The 4th one's an easy one. The applicant shall provide electricity to the bus shelter along Lake Street, suitable for the use of lighting and heat, which is a pretty common condition we've approved for conditional use permits and floor area ratio permits. Side note on that one, Metro Transit tells me that the cost of adding light and heat to bus shelters is connecting electricity up. It's not the cost of electricity itself. So if we can get developments to add the actual power connection, it greatly helps with transit ridership. So those are my 4 conditions. I'm happy to entertain my fellow commissioners adding more or having a discussion about that.
We have a motion to approve item B, the conditional use permit, adding 3 conditions to the one that is stated. Is there a second?
Could you reiterate number 2 before seconding? What is condition number 2? There's
the first additional condition.
So we had.
Oh, I see. Okay. Sorry.
Okay. Maybe I'll just restate the motion
Yeah.
so we can be certain about that before there's a second. The condition 2 that Commissioner Kronzer has added relates to creating 3 distinct masses to the south building that are connected on the 2nd through 5th floors by transparent walkways. Condition number 3 involves stepping back the 5th floor of the south building at least 10 feet from public streets. And condition 4 relates to supplying electricity to the bus shelter on Lake Street.
Can I clarify one thing?
Yeah.
The 10-foot setback is from the 4th floor building wall. So it's a 10 feet setback from floors 2, 3, and 4.
Right. I will second that with the clarification that the setback is on the newly designated south building. Currently, it's one full building. We're talking the setback just on the southern third, what is currently one building, but you're indicating will be 3 distinct masses.
My thought was it's the entire length of the south building from the existing apartment building.
Got it. You're indicating the entire length along 31st Street as well. Yeah.
All right. So we have a motion and a second to approve item B, the conditional use permit, with the 1 stated conditions, adding 3 more conditions. Is there further discussion on that? Commissioner Kranzer provided a lot of background on those recommended conditions. Since it does involve changing the design of the building a bit, I would like to give the applicant an opportunity to respond if there's anything you would like to add.
We're conferring briefly.
Okay, go ahead.
Chair Brown, Commissioners, in response to the request, we still have some architectural and some details to figure out. So without knowing the full extent, getting the general condition of the going in kind of middle back order of the 5th floor setback on the area along 31st Street and on homes can be accommodated. Typically, when doing these setbacks, the setback size is around 6 feet. If we did a 10 feet setback, that it would interrupt where our center core and our elevators get located. So we potentially request for a setback and allow us to work with staff to coordinate more final details on that. We'll have to study the constructability and the buildability of the glass corridors through the middle, but that is something we will be burdened with, and again, work with staff to support the glass see-through corridor connections. And we are agreeable to provide electricity to the bus shelter as requested by Commissioner Kranzer.
All right, thank you for that response. Commissioners, any further discussion? Commissioner Kranzer, still wishing to stick with your initial language?
I have a question for the applicant. Can you explain the 6-foot versus 10-foot setback a little more further?
Commissioner Kranzer, the 6-foot setback would effectively be about the depth of a balcony, including a parapet condition, and we can usually accommodate that within a unit mix and overall density without jogging the corridor walls and the double-loaded corridor. So it takes significant square footage out of the units along Holmes and 31st Street and provides a visual setback that I believe you're looking for, without really unraveling the entire density and mix that we have proposed.
Follow-up question. Could you not orient the units on that 5th floor differently to elongate them in order not to have to move the corridor?
Well, it's a real challenge in these wood frame buildings when we're stacking load-bearing walls and demising walls, etc. They would have a ripple effect all the way down to the 2nd or the 1st floor. It would be a more or less complete redesign.
All right. President Brown,
yes.
I would modify my condition to state a minimum of 6 feet with an ideal setback of 10 feet, as stated earlier.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to modify condition number 3 so that the setback of the fifth floor is now 6 feet. If there's no further discussion on that, we can just handle that with a voice vote. All in favor? Any opposed? That motion carries. So we've amended that third condition. Is there any further discussion on the original motion? Commissioner Kranz.
I do have another question for staff. The condition as stated that staff says 319 units. With the conditions, it may be less units. Is that just something to work through?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. If there's no further discussion, we have a motion and a second to approve item B, the conditional use permit, with the one stated condition, adding second, third, and fourth condition. Clerk, please call the roll.
Kranzer,
Aye.
Magrino,
Aye.
Rockwell,
Aye.
Schrader,
Aye.
Slack,
Aye.
Sweezy,
Aye.
6-0.
Right, and that motion carries. Commissioner Kranzer, would you like to continue
Certainly.
along with another motion?
I'll make a motion to approve staff recommendation for the rezoning from R4 to R6.
Right, we have a motion to approve the rezoning. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Further discussion. Commissioner Rockwell.
Yeah, I think a lot of people talked about this tonight. So I just want to address that. R4 has a density limit that I think is not appropriate and not consistent with the comprehensive plan in this area. This is, we've talked about this in other contexts on this podium. This is I think one of the most urban and walkable places in the city of Minneapolis. It's right at a transit center. It is right off the Midtown Greenway with some of the highest biking rates in the city. It is one of the most walkable neighborhoods in the city. I used to live at 34th and Hennepin and lived there without a car, and it was very easy. There are drugstores and hardware stores and grocery stores and you name it. And I think that we, as a city, need to move in that direction while maintaining an understanding of context. But if this kind of development isn't appropriate here, I'm not sure where it is appropriate. And we are facing an increasingly alarming picture on our climate change issue, and I think that we have an obligation to think about creating developments where people don't have a car, and I think that this will attract that kind of people for the reasons that were brought up here, is that parking is difficult in this area and driving is difficult, and I think that will in fact attract people that want to live in that more urban lifestyle, as I did and lived there, and I know that there are others that do as well. So I just wanted to address that and provide perspective for my thoughts on this rezoning.
All right, and Commissioner Slack.
First off, I want to thank everybody who came out tonight, because it's a beautiful evening out there. I can't wait till we leave to engage in this conversation about your neighborhood. Obviously, you are all really passionate about where you live, and that's important, I think, for the livability of our city. And so with that, I made the motion. I agree with the motion. I wanted staff to get up and tell us again, to talk about the FAR and the density on the site. And I also don't think it's appropriate. I do think that as we shift our paradigm, as we start to look at sort of the influx of new residents to this neighborhood, this is the one site in the uptown area that needs to be denser. I think that with the recommendation that was made by Commissioner Kranzer, I think that helps the massing piece of it. So I'm a little less worried about the overall building and how it kind of integrates and connects with the adjacencies. But this site wants to be denser. I really really thankful for your impassioned comments. Obviously, you're well organized. I think everybody did a really good job to really focus on specific elements of this proposal. I do have some concerns about traffic. I do have concerns about accessibility from a pedestrian standpoint, but I do hope that with this project, some of those issues can be solved. Traffic is going to be an ongoing issue throughout our city. Every proposal that we see nowadays, or I will say just about every proposal that we see come in front of us, traffic is the biggest issue, traffic and parking. And so as a community, we need to figure out better ways, and some of it includes more walkability, more bikeability, better transit systems, all things that we're going to need to focus on in the coming years to shape a better Minneapolis.
All right, thank you. And is there anyone else who would like to speak on that motion? Commissioner Magrino.
And I'll just add, I know traffic is something that people get very upset about. In this general sort of uptown area, traffic is actually down fairly significantly in the past 15 years, and everyone,
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. So if you check the city's traffic count management system, I think it's reflected on there. So I just wanted to throw that out there. And I know as we've had, thank you. And so I know that there's been sort of other areas in the city where there's sort of a similar situation where there is a parking lot there is a vacant lot there, and you're adding things to it. And so there's obviously going to be more trips generated by that specific site, but adding more housing in an area that is as full of amenities as this, where you can walk to a grocery store, where you can walk to the new Target Express down the street, drugstores, recreational amenities. You can take the bus downtown. Sort of in the whole system of car trips, there's fewer car trips happening. Compared to if this was 319 units of housing that was added somewhere else in the metro area. And so I think this is an important project for meeting the city's climate goals. We're kind of at the point now where transportation is the largest contributor to carbon emissions. And this is something that I think we should be paying attention to. And so I'm supportive of the rezoning request.
All right. And is there any further discussion on the motion to approve the rezoning? Hearing none, we have a motion and a second. Clerk, please call a roll.
Kronzer?
Aye.
Magrino?
Aye.
Rockwell?
Aye.
Schrader?
Aye.
Slack?
Aye.
Sweezy? Aye. 6-0.
That motion carries. Moving on, we have several more items that include C, D, E, and F. Variance. Yes, Commissioner Rockwell.
I will move staff recommendation on item C, approval of the variance for increasing maximum lot coverage.
We have a motion and a second to approve item C, the variance to increase the maximum lot coverage. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Kronzer?
Aye.
Magrino?
Aye.
Rockwell?
Aye.
Schrader?
Aye.
Slack?
Aye.
Sweezy? Aye. 6-0.
And Commissioner Rockwell.
I'd like to move approval of item D, adopting staff recommendation and adopting the conditions and adding a sixth condition that is that the privately owned public space shall remain open to the public with appropriate management parameters to be worked out with staff. I imagine it would, and that there shall be signs on the Lake Street, Humboldt, and Holmes entrances to that area that indicate the space is open to the public.
All right, I will try to restate that. So we have a motion to approve with a sixth condition added, that the applicant work with staff on an arrangement to ensure that the open space is open to the public, which would perhaps include signs indicating that from public streets. Is there a second? We have a motion and a second. Further discussion. Commissioner Rockwell.
Just a quick explanation of my intent here, and I would like the applicant just to work with staff on, wording the sign. And I understand that it's likely appropriate to have that space, have an open hours, appropriate open hours, again, deferring to staff. But I think it is important that I can see that space not being read by a passerby as open to the public. And I want to ensure that staff works with the applicant to achieve that.
All right. Is there any further discussion? We have a motion and a second to approve the site plan review, adding a condition. Commissioner Kronzer.
In terms of the condition number 5 about the building design, I support that. I just encourage the applicant to think about how to articulate that 5th floor. Maybe it's a little darker. Maybe there's not a cornice above the 4th floor and a cornice at the 5th floor. Just as you're developing that, look to simplify and minimize that massing.
All right. Thank you. And Commissioner McGreen.
I'd also like to add a 7th condition of approval for site plan review, that the applicant shall work with Public Works to add a pedestrian bump out at the corner of 31st Street and Holmes Avenue.
All right. So we have a motion to add a 7th condition, which would add a pedestrian bump out at 31st and Holmes. Is there a second?
Second.
A motion and a second. Any further discussion on that? I might just check with Mr. Crandall. Is that we want to work with staff in there, or is that do you envision any barriers?
The condition could say contingent upon Public Works approval through the PDR process. We'd want to get their okay on that, but I think that's a fine caveat.
All right. So we'll just add that that is per Public Works approval. Is there any further discussion on that 7th condition? If there is none, we can just do a voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And that motion carries. Going back to our original motion to approve the site plan review, is there any further discussion? That is a motion to approve with the 5 stated conditions, adding a 6th condition related to signage for the open space, 7th condition related to a pedestrian bump out. Hearing no further discussion, clerk, please call the roll.
Kronzer?
Aye.
Magrino?
Aye.
Rockwell?
Aye.
Schrader?
Aye.
Slack?
Aye.
Sweezy?
Aye.
6-0.
That motion carries. Finally, we have items E and F, the plat and alley vacation. Commissioner Rockwell.
I'll move staff recommendations for approval of items E and F.
Motion to approve items E and F. Is there a second? A motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Kronzer?
Aye.
Magrino?
Aye.
Rockwell?
Aye.
Schrader?
Aye.
Slack?
Aye.
Sweezy?
Aye.
6-0.
And that motion carries. That concludes our discussion of item 9. Also concludes our meeting today. We have committee of the whole this Thursday, and we are adjourned.